opportunity.
Good.
After the Home Office claimed it would only be for 12 months. Not much ambition involved in that, is there, in terms of solving the migrant crisis?
Absolutely, and the way that the Labour government gaslit the public when the migrants were first moved in there, saying, you know, you guys are absolutely being mad. Crowborough is a quiet, leafy town in East Sussex. These people, you can see, have been pushed to their absolute limit. They're not the types that you usually see protesting about this sort of thing. But that town has been absolutely desecrated.
You're ruining the country. Get Keir Starmer out. Look, England's flag. You're useless. Labour parties are useless.
I love our country. And one of the things about our country is good manners. Not very British.
What Labour advisor thought she wasn't going to be heckled at a petrol station in Leeds? Do these politicians actually ever get out and understand what it's like for real working-class people? I thought it was British to exercise a right to free speech. That's what Keith Stalin told Trump. That's what White Van Man was exercising yesterday to Richard III. Oh, yes, I remember. We're not really allowed our right to free speech in case we criticise the government.
You can't blame people so many decades away from you for the chaos that has been caused by Labour.
This is cheap politics, isn't it, Sir Ian?
Well, it's stupid politics. I mean, who raised national insurance on part-time workers? Labour. Who's been the stupid people that have wandered down the road and increased taxes on businesses and on individuals? Labour.
A lot of people get very frustrated, especially when the government says, oh, free school meals, you know, for every kid, not just the kids who really need them, free bus passes, free this, free that. None of it's free. It's subsidised and paid for by the taxpayer. And we're in this constant situation where the government's answer to everything is tax us a bit more, take more of our money, and then give some more of it away generously. It's our sodding money they're giving away.
Yeah, exactly. And it's either someone else's money today, another taxpayer, or even worse, it's the money from our...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, good morning, happy Friday one and all. What have you got planned for your bank holiday weekend? Hopefully something rather delightful with family and friends in the great British countryside, or perhaps, I don't know, we might have barbecue weather. I'm relatively hopeful. No, Alicia's shaking her head through the gallery window. No, not going to happen. But there you go. At least I will be here to keep you company, entertain you, bring all the news and give you some views, some truth bombs straight from the top of the tower. Talk towers, that is, the towers of truth, where free speech really is free. On that note, let's get our housekeeping out of the way. If you want to call the show at any point, you can. The wonderful Kieran is poised to take down your details, and we actually give you a buzz back when the time is ripe. You do not get customer service like that anywhere else, do you? No call centre in India. We have got a full, fat British cast of characters. 03444 99 1000 is the number to dial. You can also send me a WhatsApp on that number if you want to leave me a voice note. Go ahead. Maybe a ditty, a jingle, a limerick, a haiku, a freestyle rap, whatever floats your boat. It will be vetted. It has to pass the Ofcom test before it gets broadcast. But, hey, I'm up for most things. 87222 is the number if you'd rather send a text message. If you're going to do that, if you're going to be so old school that an SMS is still your preferred moyen of communication, you have to write the word talk before you type out your message. If you are going to send a carrier pigeon, be careful, because there's a lot of low-flying aircraft because of all the airports surrounding London. But make sure it gets to the 17th floor, and someone will maybe knock a window ajar, and I will detach the scroll from its talons. OK, let us get on with getting on, shall we? Because there's been some pretty obnoxious scenes going on in the north of England, up in Middlesbrough, after that horrific, fatal collision with 5 joyriders, 5 yobbos who were filming their fast car antics to impress a load of wannabes on TikTok, and ploughed into an oncoming police vehicle after going the wrong way down the A66. All 7 people involved in the collision died. But rather than taking stock of this tragedy, it seems that the relatives of those who were in the joyriding vehicle have decided that in commiseration and in memory of their death, 5 young men, however oikish they may be, you'd think that, you know, in response to a tragic multiple-car pile-up in which everyone was killed, the idea of burning a load of cars as a vigil would seem, well, a little bit distasteful. But apparently that is what is going on, and there's conversations that it's all related to various gangs up there in Middlesbrough. Let's speak now to the brilliant Rafe Hadel-Mancu, Senior Fellow at the New Culture Forum. Rafe, we find ourselves talking about some homegrown crime for once, rather than talking about crimes from people we've imported into the country. And it does remind us, doesn't it, that however much we talk about all the dreadful things we're ushering into our country with open borders, we've got enough to deal with that we grow on our own soil.
Yes, you're absolutely right. I mean, living in London as we do, all of the criminal gang networks here are ethnic. You know, north, south, east, west London have all been divided up between different ethnic groups. So we forget that there are homegrown gangs still embedded in our country. And what we've had in Middlesbrough is actually, it's not about young boys joyriding for TikTok. That's what our MPs immediately said responding to this. Whenever there's some great crime, too often now the politicians want to blame everything on social media. Actually, this wasn't about TikTok. At the heart of this feud, it's a brutal, high-stakes turf war over local drug supplies and, you know, the illicit weapons market. And so what happened here was you had feuding gangs. There are 2 feuding gangs, and people in one car had rammed the house of an opposing gang member and sped off. And rather than call the police, the rival gang got into another car, into a Passat, and went off on a hunt for them. And it was that chase, actually, to try to catch this other gang in a car that led to this crash. Because what happens is when you're trying to escape the police, if you're a criminal, the tactic is to go down the wrong way on a dual carriageway because the police are less likely to follow you. That's what was happening. And the MPs chose that this was about TikTok. No, this is a tactic of the criminal class to avoid being chased, is to go the wrong way down. And after those boys died, and those 2 policemen tragically died, well, then the feud was really on, and that's what we've seen since. It's arson, people's houses being set alight, which, of course, has led to the terrible tragedy of 2 people dying, including a 7-year-old girl. As a response to all of that now, the Cleveland police have called in their you know, allies and other police forces, and no fewer than 200 police are now descending on the area to try to stop what they think may become real street-to-street gang warfare.
Yeah, police forces that are already stretched when it comes to their numbers, and armed police who have been encouraged to give up their weapons because they fear prosecution if they ever discharge their guns. It's certainly going to be a testing time in a pretty sort of benighted part of the country as well, Middlesbrough. I know Teesside pretty well. It's been rather neglected and left behind for a number of years, ever since sort of all the big sort of chemical manufacturing up there was mothballed. We'll have to keep an eye on that and see how things progress. Let's talk about some domestic policies now, because Reform UK at it again. Another policy, another day. They're like going crazy. It reminds me a little bit like of those sort of automatic tennis ball machines that just pings out shots every 5 seconds. I can't keep up with it. Great to see that they're keeping themselves busy. But Danny Kruger, he's been released from the oubliette. He's now in circulation and is talking about various actions that Reform want to take to essentially gatekeep and safeguard democracy. And of those, the headline, I suppose, is to block voters who cannot speak English. I think this is especially when it comes to family voting and people who turn up at a polling station clearly unable to read English, clearly unable to speak English, and therefore clearly unable to make a decision for themselves. But they're also talking about preventing people from the Commonwealth from having the vote and taking part in the plebiscite. Also talking about massively restricting the postal vote, which I certainly believe is absolutely abundantly necessary, given how much that system is abused, particularly by certain communities. What do you make of this policy, Rafe? Is it long overdue? Is it a little bit heavy-handed, or does it not go far enough?
Well, and yet another excellent policy from Reform. I keep thinking they're looking at my newsfeed and watching my videos, because I've been banging on all these things for a couple of years. From social housing we had earlier this week, now this policy. The Commonwealth thing is a huge issue. You know, Commonwealth citizens coming over here, even if they're students just coming over for a brief period, have the right to vote in our elections. And given the numbers we have here from India, Pakistan and Nigeria and elsewhere, they can easily turn elections and constituencies. That has to go. Excellent on that front. Yes, of course, if you can't speak the language, how can you make an informed vote? And the issue here, of course, is people are being coerced to vote for the candidate of the elders' choice within that community. But the real issue here isn't so much the family voting, it's postal voting. The reason we saw family voting in the Gorton and Denton by-election, for example, was because people didn't have time to organise their postal votes. The corruption that is involved around postal votes in this country has taken us back to the era of the 19th century and the rotten boroughs. And I'm amazed there haven't been police investigations into this, particularly in the north of England, where you have essentially Muslim community leaders going door to door, sometimes with gang leaders, just harvesting postal votes, telling people to just sign the postal vote and they will fill in the rest later. And then vast tranches of these postal votes are then handed over to a specific party or a specific candidate, and they will be basically stuffed in there. This is what's happening in this country. There has been a glove-in-hand coordination between some political candidates and local communities. It needs to be called out, and I'm amazed other parties haven't spoken out about this before. So yes, all three of these policies absolutely needed to safeguard democracy in this country.
I mean, my view is they could actually build on this. I think there's much more that needs to be addressed. For example, we have, particularly in boroughs of London, entire councils which are run by seemingly foreign-born men. I think of Tower Hamlets, where the mayor there doesn't really have a great rap sheet when it comes to upholding democracy. We also have members of parliament who seem to want to campaign on foreign issues such as Gaza or getting an airport built in Kashmir. And should they actually be looking at who can take part in standing for election? Should they actually consider whether or not someone who might be a dual passport holder is eligible to run for high office, or whether or not it is okay to campaign on issues that don't really mean anything to this country?
Well, that's a trickier argument to make, I would say, because, if you are a British citizen, you should have the right to stand for election in this country. And if there are many people who are dual citizens who are, have primary loyalty to this country first and foremost. And in a democracy, the people should have the right to be able to choose their own candidate. It's a great tragedy that we've got to a situation where we do have ghettos, we have ethno-nationalist silos capable of putting forward whichever candidate they want. But in a democracy, I think it's quite dangerous if we start to decide who you can and cannot choose from amongst your own community. The question is, how do we solve the issue of these communities? How do we disperse them? There are systems in Denmark, for example. In Denmark, they don't allow any more than 30% of any community to be ethnic minority in these ghettos to try to disperse them. There are other solutions you could possibly consider, but I'm very wary about interfering with the right of anyone to stand for election.
I mean, I heard the other day that the Labour Party very predictably are ruminating over whether we should move to a system of proportional representation. I predicted it 2 years ago when Starmer came in, that the left wing would mess with the nature of the plebiscite, mess with the boundaries of the franchise in order to essentially rig themselves into office ad infinitum. And what strikes me when it comes to if we were to move to a system of proportional representation is that, to me, would sign the death knell for normal voting and usher in a huge new era of sectarian voting. I think the people who'd benefit the most from moving to such a system would be things like the Muslim vote.
Yes, and of course it would shoot, the Labour Party would shoot itself in the foot. That's why you're seeing them sort of backtrack on the giving votes to 16-year-olds, because they now realise most of those votes would go over to the Green Party. But the reality is, this would be a disaster for the right, and people need to wake up about this. In the 21st century, with the exception of 2015, at no general election have more votes been cast for right-wing parties than for left-wing parties. I'm afraid to say the majority of votes in this country go to parties on the left. The only reason we've had strong, allegedly conservative governments over recent decades is because there's only been one party on the right. The left have been divided between 6 parties: Plaid, SNP, Greens, Labour, Lib Dems, and so forth. And once you split the vote on the right, well, then it's impossible to form a strong majority in this country. You need to unite the right. That, many people will say that needs to be under the reform banner. Otherwise, we're going to be doomed. And if you have proportional representation, well, essentially, it's game over for probably 20 years. We'll be enduring left-wing governments. That's the reality.
And they know what they're doing. I mean, the minute that Andy Burnham stood down as Mayor of Manchester to become Mayor of England, they changed the plebiscite there, didn't they? They changed the rules of the game to ensure that they retained that particular office. Talking about splitting the right, Kemi Badenoch is saying she will deport every illegal immigrant. Our country is a home, not a hotel. The thing is, with this, Rafe, she can bang on about how much she wants to control immigration. She can go on about it until the cows come home. The difficulty is, a lot of the damage that we're seeing now is the lag-time real-world effects of the Boris wave, of policies that were put into place by governments where she served in cabinet.
Well, this is it. I mean, look, it all sounds very good. Everything we're saying from Kemi sounds great. And if the Tories had been saying this in 2010 or 2014 or 2016, perhaps they would deserve our vote again. But, as Einstein said, the definition of insanity is to do the same thing over and over again. And I'm afraid the Tory party betrayed this country in election after election. They made promises before, remember, that they would lower immigration to the tens of thousands. What happened? Went up to 1.3 million gross. Never forget that. The Boris wave, 2021 to 2024, 7% of the demography of this country changed in 3 years. Unprecedented in 1,000 years of our history. We can never forgive them, never forget, and I'm afraid to say it's far too soon to give them a second chance.
So answer me this, OK? I mean, there's another strident headline today that migrants are being granted permanent settlement or citizenship every minute during a very recent 3-month period, which is absolutely breathtaking. May as well just get Pedro Sanchez to come in and run the Home Office. But answer me this, Rafe. When I look across Europe, I look at the polling of Rassemblement in France. I look at the polling of the AfD in Germany. I look at the rise of Vox in Spain, although they also have a sort of fairly half-decent centre-right party doing extremely well there as well. The PVV in the Netherlands, Vlaams Belang in Belgium. Why are Reform going down in the polls at the moment? If people can't trust the Conservatives on immigration, if this really is the hot potato topic on the doorstep, which I still believe it is, why is it then that Reform seem to be backsliding?
It was quite simple. Most people in the British public still get their news from the mainstream media. There are very few people, unfortunately, on places like X, which are real free speech platforms. There are only 20 million X accounts in this country. Most of those aren't even politically engaged. Talk is vital, but unfortunately, most people still consume the mainstream media, and there has been a concerted effort by the mainstream media, hand in glove with the Uniparty, to attack and undermine Reform because they are so scared of the chances of Reform. And of course, you've got the splintering on the right as well. You've got the rise of Restore as well. And I've got many friends in Restore as well. I mean, in terms of my viewers on the New Culture Forum and everything else, we're a broad party. But the reality is, once you start these fights on the right, once you start attacking your own side, once you've got the media establishment against you as well, it's undeniable that your vote's going to go down. And people need to refocus on the core issue here, which is to unite the right and realise that we have an existential crisis facing this country now.
But the same could be said, right? Let's say the AfD in Germany, the same could be said of them. They've actually got an active establishment trying to block them from participating in elections. They are demonised by German media outlets. They also have the CDU, which they have essentially completely trammelled into nothingness now in polling. And yet they are polling the highest in Berlin. And you look at polling in the east of Germany. It's running in the 40% odd. So I just feel there's something going on here. Is it because now on the right wing what we have is very little difference between the various contender parties? In fact, if you were to white label all of their various manifestos and policy pledges, you could probably barely tell the difference between them. So they're essentially self-cannibalising.
Yes, no, I mean that's also part of it too. I think everyone has basically parked their tanks on each other's lawns, and they've realised where the real votes are to be getting. So yes, it is quite difficult. I mean, Reform's policy on social housing is much more strict than Restore's policy on social housing. Reform is now essentially saying that there are two different types of British citizen, those who are British born and those who aren't. That's the first time we've heard that in British politics as well. So yes, everyone is trying to find their way to break through to the British public. But there are also issues, I think, around the British people as a whole. I think a lot of the British people simply need to wake up to the reality of the threat that's facing this country. And I think too often what we see, I often say, is what will it take for the British people to finally wake up? We thought it would be the Manchester Arena bombing. We thought it would be what happened in Southport after the massacre of those poor girls. And you get this momentary period of angst, and then the British just seem to go back into their normal malaise again. And I think there needs to be some wake-up call for enough British people to wake up to the reality of the limited time we have to save this country and unite around one party.
I agree. I do find this sort of all trying to out Farage. Well, you know, just let Farage be Farage. I think the Conservatives would far better serve the country if they went to try and take back the constituencies they lost to the Lib Dems in the Shire, quite frankly. I think that would be a far more valuable use of their time in order to spread right-wingery as far and wide as possible. But there you go. I don't get to call the shots in that regard. Rafe, thank you ever so much. It's always wonderful catching up with you. No doubt we'll do it again soon. What do you think? What are your thoughts on that issue and all the other things we're talking about? 0344 499 1000 is the number to send me a WhatsApp message. 87222 is for text messages like the word talk before you send your message. Let's read a few now. Morning, Alex. Hello. Burnham is fast becoming the Alan Partridge of politics. News just in. Russia are threatening to bomb us. I think rogue traders are a tad more important. What an absolute joke of a man. He won't last a year. Sadly, I think he will last a year. But hopefully no more than 2. Totally agree with Danny Kruger. People don't speak or understand English, so how can they vote? This is ludicrous. Yeah, very much agree, Fiona. And Steve makes an interesting point. When I raised the spectre of whether somebody who has 2 passports, I'm not talking dual heritage, I'm talking dual nationality, should be able to stand for election. And Steve says, my son is vetted and works in the defence industry. His company will not employ people with dual nationality. That is my position. If you're going to be in the Parliament of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, you have no business also wanting to be a passport-holding citizen of another nation. If you are going to stand in front of the peoples of one nation and say, I represent you, the decent thing to do would be to revoke your citizenship somewhere else. That is my opinion. No one else has to agree with it, but I think it would go a long way with dealing with the rising Islamic vote situation we have in this country, because I wonder how many of those gentlemen, because it's always men, isn't it, for obvious reasons, I wonder how many of them still maintain their Bangladeshi and Pakistani passports. OK, let us take a short break now. On the other side, we're going to be joined by former Met Police Detective Chief Inspector Mike Neville to talk about the ongoing blight of lawless Britain. Every day, new headlines. It feels like we're living in an era of Mad Max. We're talking about all of that just after this.
I do not care about Meghan and Harry. I do not care at all. Not a gnat's backside, do I? Not at all. If they walked in this room, I'd say, get out. I don't care about Meghan and Harry. Can I put that any more emphatically? I do not care. I love Angela Levin, but I don't care about Meghan and Harry, all right? It doesn't keep me awake at night. I don't wake up in the morning going, I wonder what Megs is up to. Never, ever does it cross my mind. I don't give a hoot about Meghan and Harry.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
Do you know what? I remember as a kid in the 90s, it was all about joyriding and ram raids. They often made headlines, always people driving into the sort of metal shutters in front of Merritts in some sort of Volkswagen Golf or a similarly pimped up rude boy vehicle. Then that sort of seemed to stop and we focused mainly on organised crime, which is dominated by foreign gangs. And then we realised we imported lots of criminality from deeply misogynistic, backwards twisted countries. And so it is interesting that we once again focus our attention on some of the huge issues certain communities are facing with homegrown gangbanging. Let's speak now to Mike Neville, former Met Police Detective Chief Inspector. I mean, talking about this horrific incident on the A66, which we're now increasingly beginning to learn is tied to rival gangs operating in Middlesbrough. Feels rather like a blast from the past, but it isn't, is it? Because these sorts of things still go on in the big cities, such as Bristol. Certainly, there's a huge problem with white gangs up in Liverpool. No doubt there are many in London, although I do imagine that the main landscape of crime in the capital city is still likely driven by foreign gangs. Talk to us about the scenes up there, this vigil for one of the perpetrators of the horrific head-on clash on the A66 that killed 5 young men, all tow rags, but nonetheless, it's always a tragedy to see the loss of young lives, and even more tragic, the death of 2 police officers. And then the vigil, so-called vigil, letting off balloons, well, that's nice, but then joyriding cars around a horse paddock and setting those on fire as well. What is going on?
Well, it's just a culmination of broken Britain, isn't it, Alex? And I think Middlesbrough in particular sums up how these northern towns have simply been ignored. And often, because they're white and working class, they've been completely ignored. And here you see the consequences of allowing a sort of shameless type culture to develop where there's several generations never worked. And where crime is completely acceptable. And those young men know that there's little consequence to committing crime. So you can drive the wrong way down the motorway or an A road, and there's no punishment. With the Telegraph reporting, that people who do that are often given suspended sentences, if anything at all. You've got the Cleveland police who were inspected last year, who were told they had to require improvement in investigating crime. And the net result is there are some decent and honourable people in Middlesbrough who just want to live their lives, get on with work and exist. But they live in fear of these awful gangs, and they've been utterly betrayed by a succession of governments who've allowed this to go on, who have not dealt with these gangs and created this awful, dreadful mess that we see.
Yeah, I think the rot really set in when David Cameron said, let's all go and hug a hoodie. It sort of set a tone, didn't it? That actually, these people deserve our sympathy. They've been brought up in deindustrialised areas where there's no gainful employment. Well, that may be so, and that might be a tragedy, but they know they can go and perpetrate criminal acts and get away with it. I mean, if I were to say on air right now something, I don't know, Islamophobic, I could well have a knock at the door by the fuzz. But if they want to put countless videos of doing donuts in car parks, going 200 miles an hour down residential streets, nothing happens. Nothing happens.
Incredible. I mean, my expertise, Alex, is catching criminals with images. So whilst those videos are vile, they do provide the police with very good evidence that they could use. And I could help them use those and catch those criminals, and so they could go to jail. But the problem is, of course, is even if Cleveland police pulled their finger out and they prosecuted those characters, they go to court. Would they go to jail? Well, the Telegraph's telling us probably not for those sort of crimes. And even if they went there, you've got these early release schemes where they see, there's no consequence whatsoever. So they're going to carry on until we crack down on this and look at the short-term solution is to crack down ruthlessly on this and put these young men in jail for a long time so they can't intimidate other people. The long-term thing is to look at these places and think, well, just because they're white and working class doesn't mean we have to ignore them. And that's what's happened in the past. There's funding for everybody else, and we see that white working class kids are often the bottom of the stack when it comes to things like education. So there are several things we could do, but the first thing is a purge of these gangs and get them in jail.
I mean, they know that they can act with impunity, basically. I don't think they're frightened of jail. They know they're going to have a short sentence. They know that when they get in there, they're probably just going to be smoking spice and playing football or something, and then within about 2 weeks, they'll be released.
Maybe having sex with one of the prison officers.
Oh, that's a weird thing, isn't it? That's a whole other issue that I'd love to get my teeth into one day, the sort of OnlyFans prison guard phenomenon. I've got my whole theories on why socially things like that seem to be on the up. But talking about people who know they can act with impunity, I feel that we're becoming a bit like the Costa del Crime, aren't we, as a country? Because foreign gangs target Britain specifically because they know it's going to be an easy ride. We have huge Turkish gangs. Albanian gangs have consolidated much of the drugs underworld, people trafficking. We have Chinese and Vietnamese gangs who are now running the cannabis scene. And it turns out that the number of foreign criminals just roaming around, foreign national offenders just roaming around, not in prison, living freely in the community, is over 21,000. 21,000. That's gone up by 2,000 since a year ago, with the increase blamed on Labour's Sentencing Act, which has seen thousands of criminals released early. But it strikes me that, almost every Albanian who comes to the country has come here to take part in some sort of nefarious activity. Turkish gangs, Albanian gangs, Bulgarian gangs, whether they're doing crime related to welfare fraud, ATM fraud, the fake insurance stuff where they drive into someone and then say, pay me money or XYZ, whether it's a sort of higher end of crime, drugs trafficking, shootings, pop-up brothels. It seems to be constantly operated by cartels of foreigners who clearly think we're a very, very light touch.
Well, we are, Alex, aren't we? I refer you to, I don't know, about 20 years ago, there's a programme called Karachi Cops. It's on YouTube. It's worth watching. Don't be a criminal in Karachi because the police will be utterly ruthless with you. But these gangs know if they come here. If you're in Turkey, the police will be utterly ruthless with you. And I'm sure the Albanian police are just the same. But they know they'll come here, they'll get arrested and get a cup of tea. Even if they go to a prison, it'll be a lot easier life and they'll be out soon. And when you say there's 21,000 foreign offenders and all, that's only the ones we know about, of course, because the police are solving sort of 1% of theft. So that means 99 of the thieves are getting away with it. So there's a real massive problem here. And what you have, of course, is that these gangs like the Albanians and Turkish, they're utterly ruthless and they're utterly organised, often on military lines. And so, they take some defeating and it takes the police. We've got 43 police forces in this little country trying to sort this out. And that's too many. And it's a big mess. And all these factors come together in producing this crime wave that we see.
Mike, the sooner, we talk about it a lot, don't we? The sooner they roll out your facial recognition technology and actually use it, build some prisons, bring back stop and search, make prison grotesque. In France, where they've got an overcrowded prison estate, I think it's sort of like 2,000 odd extra men just sleeping in multiple mattresses on the prison floor. That couldn't happen to our poor prisoners here. It would affect their human rights. And as for the Albanian criminals, they just know they get to turn around and say it's modern slavery. It wasn't me. I was trafficked over here. I've been made to do it. My son doesn't like chicken chicken nuggets. OK, there you go. You get to stay. Ridiculous state of affairs. Every single aspect of public life at the moment, Mike. Like I said, I'm counting down the days until the United Kingdom becomes like a scene from Mad Max.
I offer my services, Alex. I offer my services to help with my human super recognizer and facial recognition. I'm here to help. So I'm not here to moan, I'm here to assist.
There you go. There was something kind of beautifully ironic at the juxtaposition of Mike talking about his superfacial recognition as his own face disappeared and got replaced by his name. The magic of live broadcasting. OK, we are going to be taking a short break now. When we come back, we're going to be talking about Russia, who are certainly saber-rattling over our, let's say, acceleration of our involvement in Ukraine, providing them drones, providing them Storm Shadow blueprints so they can make their own missiles. Well, Putin said he's going to hit back. Could this be connected as well with the cyber attacks that have taken place against various UK airports, including Stansted and Manchester, with phone numbers, emails being seized and a ransom being charged, ransom not paid? A lot to cover in the world of what foreign operatives acting on behalf of hostile states may be planning to get up to in this country. To discuss all of that after the break, we're going to be joined by security specialist Will Geddes. Back in a moment.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Something rather unprecedented happened a couple of days ago, and that was the head of the CIA in America flew over to Moscow. And not only did he fly over to Moscow, he wanted everybody to know that that was where he was going. He allowed his flights to be tracked on OSINT platforms, places where weirdos like me like to look at what's in the sky. When it's a proper military aircraft, they don't often register. But the boss of the CIA wanted everyone to know that he was heading over to Russia. So what was all that about? Why were there such important emergency high-level talks? Well, the suggestion is that he had gone over there to warn Vladimir Putin against retaliatory action or aggressive action to a NATO member state, also pointing out that the average life expectancy of a Russian fighter on the front line is under half an hour. In the meat grinder that is the war of attrition, particularly in the eastern of Ukraine. Well, since Andy Burnham became Prime Minister and went over to do the obligatory photo call with Zelensky, he has promised Ukraine the blueprints for long-range Scalp missiles or Storm Shadows in order that they may manufacture them themselves and then potentially use them to strike deep into the heart of Russian territory. Same as well with now cooperating on the construction of drones. And Vladimir Putin has told the UK it must reverse its hostile and aggressive stance or Russia could attack military bases. Now, this has already been taking place in certain former Soviet bloc countries, such as Latvia, where they use local gangs to create plausible deniability before committing arson attacks. We know as well that Russia uses a whole smorgasbord of grey zone warfare tactics, from illegal migration to cyber attacks to extrajudicial killings on our own soil. Let's speak to security specialist Will Geddes. Now, we saw Palestine action, pretty much, I would suggest, connected to hostile terrorist states, breaking into some of our airfields and also breaking into Israeli manufacturers of weapons or people connected to manufacturing widgets that we may sell for dual-use products to Israel. And now we're hearing that Russia may well be doing the same. We know, of course, that Sir Keir Starmer's 2 properties were firebombed by a couple of Ukrainians who were employed directly by the FSB to commit arson. So this is nothing new, but I think what is being suggested is such aggressive action on our own soil could now be ramped up. What do you know about this?
Well, good morning, Alex. I mean, as we know, this has been a chessboard for the last few years in terms of moving the pieces around, saber rattling, making threats, not necessarily delivering on them, but again, just showing that we are not going to be taken as vulnerable against the very clandestine and covert operations that Russia has been launching. And you've just given a couple of very key examples where puppets like Palestine Action will be utilised, financed, motivated by third parties, equally those that firebombed Keir Starmer's properties. So, you know, where we have 2 levels of this kind of warfare that's going on. We've got obviously the rhetoric, which is publicised, and like you rightly said, you know, it wasn't an accident that the CIA representative was disclosed as going to Russia. Again, it's all playing to the narrative, it's playing to the optics. But I think Andy Burnham is playing with fire a little bit with sharing the blueprints and other very, very proprietary intellectual property with Ukraine for some of its armaments. I think it's a very bold move on his part. And I think Putin, again, as is always the way with these things, Alex, nobody wants to lose face. Nobody wants to look as though they're going to be losing. And really, ultimately, at the moment, it's just a tit for tat right across the board, with Russia doing it in a more covert way, despite what they're saying out loud.
I wonder how stretched our security service are with porous borders where we've let in people from Lord knows who we know that IRGC have claimed that they've smuggled operatives in, cells in via the channel. Yep. Anybody, Albanian criminal gangs, but no doubt Russia could be doing the same. We know that Wagner mercenaries are stationed all over the world. In fact, Russia recruits a lot of sub-Saharan Africans to go fight on the front lines against Ukraine. And it just feels to me that we've got undefended critical infrastructure, massively porous borders. It's almost a miracle that our agencies so far have been able to hold back any big, significant attack on domestic soil.
Yeah, I totally agree, Alex. I mean, we really have to give all credit to our intelligence agencies, both domestically MI5, overseas MI6 and GCHQ, obviously, running intercepts on various communications which are travelling not only in this country but around the world. But if we go back and break down some of those elements you mentioned there, the Albanians, I mean, for example, I think in terms of any kind of penetration or recruitment by Russia or Iran, for that matter, with the Albanians would be met stonewalled. The Albanians have had control of this country, and certainly in terms of organised crime, for a number of years now. They run most of the illicit activities, from people trafficking, and they could be used as conduits
but not in a deliberate sense, if you like. With both Iran and Russia, though, they are all about the proxies. They're about recruiting individuals, much in the same way as terrorist organizations will, that will then carry out these actions on their behalf. But the one thing I would say certainly about Iran and Russia is more often than not, these individuals are low-level criminals, as they often are in terrorism attacks as well, and they're financially motivated. They're financially driven to actually, rather than necessarily an agenda, albeit Palestine Action was a good case of just Muppets and puppets basically being incentivized to carry out these attacks in the name of Palestine.
Let's talk now about sort of grey zone warfare, which drifts a lot into cybercrime. And this latest cyber attack on 3 UK airports, including Stansted and Manchester, my understanding is that they were trying to harvest data. They managed to do that. They then demanded £5 million for that data to be returned and not sold on to the highest bidder. Do we know yet who was behind that? And the other question I have is, what then happens to this data when you've got these sort of organised crimes or perhaps foreign entities doing cyber attacks and getting hold of people's information, mobile phones, email addresses, that they then essentially try and flog? Who's buying them and for what purpose?
Well, I mean, certainly in terms of these 3 airports that were targeted, I mean, this is your standard ransomware from what we understand, where it's not the software that they've injected, it was the harvesting of the data. And I think there needs to be a very clear understanding of how they managed to do that. And it was from people connecting to the free airport Wi-Fi, which is something I would always advise against doing. You've got data, don't connect to free public Wi-Fi.
I don't understand. Right, because this really grinds my gears. We have all these pop-ups, don't we? Every 5 seconds you want to get onto some sort of website, you've got to sort of click something, say OK, about cookies and GDPR, which frankly does nothing apart from get in the way of you and whatever it is you're trying to look at. It doesn't really seem to perform any other duty. And yet, if I go down to my local pub and for whatever reason need to connect to Wi-Fi because the signal's rubbish, because, hey, it's the UK, where is 4G, 5G, where's even 3G in most parts of the country? Or if you go to an airport and you want to be able to connect to Wi-Fi, because perhaps you might be a foreign traveller who doesn't yet have a UK SIM. Why do you need to put your email address in? I don't want to have to give Green King my email address if I want to be able to, I don't know, surf the internet in one of their pubs. I don't want to have to put my email address into the airport if I've had a foreign SIM card in my phone that I haven't switched back yet and I need to be able to, you know, book an Uber or contact my family. Why do we have to keep doing this? Surely that is an area where, given that data breaches are such a sensitive issue and used very much these days in foreign criminality, surely that is something we need to say enough is enough. If you're going to have free Wi-Fi, let people connect without having to tell you their date of birth, their name, their home address, their telephone number, and how you can sell all that information online.
Well, there you capture it in the term free, Alex. Nothing in this world is for free. So if you're going to have access to that internet connection, it ain't going to be free. There's going to be someone who's making some money somewhere out of it, whether it be your email address, your telephone number, that's then going to be passed on to various marketing companies, which will then deluge your inbox and your SMSs with a whole load of toot. It's one of those things that unfortunately is the payoff. So the only way that you can really protect yourself, and this isn't 100%, but it certainly will make you a heck of a lot safer, is first and foremost, if you can use a VPN, have a VPN on your actual device that you're connecting with. Now, here's the difficult bit. You could, if you have a Wi-Fi connection, go to any one of those instant email address websites like 5-Minute Mail or 20-Minute Mail. If you go on Google and have a look for those, they will create a temporary email address for you, which isn't giving up the keys to the kingdom of your own personal address. And it's something that you can use very, very quickly. So if someone else has got connection, they've got data, they're part of your traveling party, I wouldn't necessarily suggest you stop a stranger in the airport and say, oi, could you have a look on here and create a 20-minute mail for me? But it's one way to potentially ensure that your personal email address is not being circulated everywhere. But to go to your question earlier, Alex, what do they do with it? Well, again, a lot of this data will go onto the dark web. and it will be purchased there. I've had a number of cases where I've worked with companies who've had very proprietary, very sensitive data stolen from them, being put on the dark web, and there are companies like mine that will then go and retrieve it or capture it or pay for it if need be. But again, this wasn't the case with these airports. It wasn't a Trojan ransomware that was injected into their main server. This was fundamentally people connecting to the free Wi-Fi. So if you do want to connect to free Wi-Fi, have a VPN on.
God, I didn't know about 5-minute emails or whatever. I'm so analog, Geddes. I used to have some sort of old Hotmail address that I used for all of my spam, but it unsurprisingly
That's
got
almost
hacked.
as bad as AOL, Alex.
Yeah, oh, mate, I'm old school. I'm a 90s kid. But no, unsurprisingly, I kept using the same address, my old MSN address, and it then got hacked. But that was why I had it, for all of those annoying logins. Will, thank you ever so much. It's always great to catch up with you. And very sensible advice given there. So there you go. Mark his words. Get yourself some sort of, like, you know, burner email address so you cannot have your data flogged on the dark web online. We are going to be taking a short break now. After that, we're going to be taking some calls. And if you want to add your name to that list, 0344 499 1000 is the number to dial. It is your normal network rates, which means basically doesn't cost you anything. Free speech really is free here in Talk Towers. You can also send me a WhatsApp to that address. And the lovely Alicia, who's producing me today, said, tell people to send voice notes. You'd love a voice note, Alex. We haven't had any yet. So come on, don't be coy. Lay me down a little minute's worth of your opinion, and we will play it out on air. It gives me a little bit of a reprieve. I like to consider it in the context of a 3-hour show, like a mini break, if you will. 87222 is the number if you'd rather send a text message. If you're going to do that, write the word talk before you send your text. Let's do a couple of messages before we go into break. Morning, Alex. I see the Spaniards of Ceuta have had enough of this invasion of illegal immigrants. When the Red Cross came to give them aid, the good people of Ceuta stopped them. On the 8th is the start of the school term, and people are having to ask police and military to escort children to and from school for fear of attacks and rapes. That's from David in the Cotswolds. Well, we are going to be talking about the latest from Ceuta, as well as some of the other striking stories from the European continent, with the wonderful Ralph Schulhammer a bit later on in the programme. Mark from Selby makes a very interesting point. He says, Alex, we may well depend on the large number of white criminal families and gangs to help out the army when the sleeper cells wake up in their HMOs and open the last door on their advent calendar. Just a thought. I mean, it's an interesting thought and probably quite a true thought, actually. Not that I condone white gangs and criminal entities and yobbos in the United Kingdom, but well, when it comes to the civilizational battle of the end times, the Mad Maxification of the United Kingdom, maybe they'll come in handy. Tommy says, good morning, Alex. Shouldn't these MPs, civil servants, judges all be charged with treason for aiding people who are clearly a threat to this country? I've said for a long time, is there any way for private prosecutions against policymakers? I'm told there isn't, really. Imagine if there was. There'd be an endless litany of litigation against various political parties and public servants. But I think it is utterly despicable that, you know, people in the United Kingdom, innocents, essentially losing their lives or losing their dignity or having their lives destroyed, having their property stolen or being raped or having people murdered because basically government aren't doing their job effectively. Right, on that note, let's take a break, and I can't wait to chat with Paul and Rob after it, and perhaps you. See you on the other side.
I do not care about Meghan and Harry. I do not care at all. Not a gnat's backside, do I? Not at all. If they walked in this room, I'd say, get out. I don't care about Meghan and Harry. Can I put that any more emphatically? I do not care. I love Angela Levin, but I don't care about Meghan and Harry, all right? It doesn't keep me awake at night. I don't wake up in the morning going, I wonder what Megs is up to. Never, ever does it cross my mind. I don't give a hoot about Meghan and Harry.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
OK, let's hit up those phone lines. First up, we've got Paul in Essex on the blower. Hi, Paul.
Hello, Alex. How are you?
Very well. How are you doing, my love?
Very good, thank you. I'd just like to bring up a point, something Ian mentioned on the previous show, and something I've heard a few times over the last few months about whether Nigel Farage and Reform are actually ready for a general election, whenever that may be. Well, if you think about Labour and Conservatives who've been in power for decades and look at the state of this country, I would much rather take a Nigel Farage Reform government that's not quite ready over what we've had in terms of where we're going. We've only got one general election left, in my view, and there's an argument it may even be too late now to change direction of this country. If you don't think we're in a precarious situation, look at the last few weeks where we've seen leaflets being handed out telling these thousands of backward people arriving on our shores they're not to rape people, they're not to attack kids, this, that and the other. And then we've got the revelation of the Talk guy who came over on a migrant boat. Look at these people that are coming over.
I know.
I'm just astonished that the left themselves can't see for their future families.
They can see. They can see they've just bought into their own mad sort of modern zealotry, their own neo-religions of open borders and multiculturalism. They've created a throne of bones on top of that hill of treachery, and they don't want to give it up, because if they do, it's all gone, isn't it? All of their jobs, their positions. These people couldn't actually survive in the real world of private enterprise. They depend upon leftism in order to make their money. In fact, leftism in this country is probably one of the most profitable entities, profitable rackets that ever exists, whether you're talking about the illegal immigration industrial complex, DEI, the lot of it. I've been very critical of Reform lately for, like I said, just churning out so many policies. It's like chasing a bar of soap around the shower. I kind of would suggest to them that no one policy is really landing, sinking in, resonating and being remembered by voters, because there's just so much that they're coming out with. But on the opposite side, it does suggest that they are doing a lot of preparation and really getting policies together. So perhaps that will actually entice people to support them. Of course, many other political parties are out there, and I like to lambast all of them as much as I can in equal measure, although some parties are clearly worse than others. Right, OK, thank you for your call, Paul. I'm afraid, Rob, we won't have time to get round to you on this round of calls because I can hear the music in my ears and the countdown has begun for the top of the hour break. But don't worry, because we still have 2 hours of no-nonsense news coming right up. So do stay tuned to Talk. We'll definitely be doing a lot more calls later on in the programme. But for now, go pop the kettle on, or, well, whatever it is you fancy, and I'll see you on the other side of this break.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show. Did you make that cup of tea? Hope you did. I think the lovely Kieran's going to make me one. He's a good brew maker, that lad, I'm telling you. It's not easy to please someone. It's not easy to please a Brit when it comes to how they take their tea. There is only one good way to take a cup of tea. Milk in first. If you do the opposite, like my mother, you are a cretin. And no sugar. And at least use a tea bag, let it stew a little bit. And also semi-skim milk, don't do that. It's got to be full fat. We don't have that in this building because there are some woke elements to working in a multinational corporation. I've never understood the point of semi-skim milk or skimmed milk. Why would you do that? Like, just have milk. Milk is just perfect as it is. Why take out all the goodness? The lovely fats, the lipids. Oh, my God, my producer likes oat milk. She is automatically fired. Please, Luke, drag her out by her ponytail. Put Kieran in the hot seat. You're relegated, Alicia. You disgust me. Oat milk, my goodness. Right, OK, let us get back to talking about domestic affairs. We're joined now by Paul Embry, trade unionist and author of Despised: Why the Modern Left Loathes the Working Class. Well, let's talk about why the working class loathe the modern left. And one of those reasons, one assumes, is because apparently one migrant is granted permanent settlement or citizenship every single minute. That is the case over the past 3 months to June. 140,122 people secured one of the two statuses. I'm sorry, this is now cultural vandalism and social engineering. There's no other way to describe it. That is ridiculous. We were talking once upon a time about bringing immigration down to the tens of thousands, not actually giving 140,000 people the right to now say we're British and have access to all the same services, benefits, voting rights, whatever it may be. 140,000 in 3 months. How dare they do this to this country? Paul, I mean, sadly in this day and age, there's nothing about this headline that surprises me. I think this is the lag time after the Boris wave. Those people have now come online to be able to say we've got a right to remain. Reform UK has estimated that this number of people in just those 3 months would leave the taxpayers with a bill of £48 billion over their lifetimes. Why are we handing out citizenship as if any old character from anywhere can just come here and then, hurrah, give it enough time, you're the same as us now?
Morning, Alex. I tend to agree. I think when it comes to citizenship or permanent settlement, the rules should be tough. They should be robust. There should be a very rigorous process in place over a long period of time before people are granted either. And I think there's a sense in the country that what we've done with the existing process for a number of years now is to hand these things out like confetti. And I think that does two things. First of all, I think it acts as a pull factor in terms of, wider immigration from both the EU and beyond, and the small boats, etc. People think that if there is a fairly easy route to citizenship or permanent settlement, and they can possibly bring their families in on visas as well, then it's little wonder that people are clamouring to get here. And I think the other effect really is that for many, if you like, native citizens, the concept of citizenship starts to become meaningless, because they think, actually, if there is no more significant relationship between me and my state and my country, even though I was born here, raised here, went to school here, have worked here, have paid my taxes here all of my life, then frankly, what is a nation state? What does the concept of citizenship mean? And, a general sense too, that rather than being a country, rather than being a home, we've turned into something kind of resembling the Olympic Village, where You know, we've kind of welcomed people very easily from all different backgrounds and cultures and nationalities. I am pro-immigration. I believe that, broadly speaking, a modest and manageable number of people coming in can be a good thing. But the reality is it has completely got out of control in recent years. It has resulted, I think, in a massive lack of public trust in our institutions and in our politics and in our government. And I think we're going to pay the price of that in terms of social disintegration and conflict, sadly, for many years to come.
Let's talk about Andy Burnham now, the Mayor of the United Kingdom, ribbon cutter in chief. It's funny, isn't it, that under Sir Keir Starmer, they suddenly brought in this idea that they wanted to impose a limit on cash gift to parties ever since reform. Were given a heck of a lot of money, millions indeed, by one particular billionaire in the form of Christopher Harborne. I'm sorry to say, but the left especially. I mean, look, the Tories like gerrymandering, that's their favourite tool to mess with the plebiscite. The left love to suddenly change the way that we vote, change things like donations. Oh, you can't get it from someone who lives abroad. Well, guess what? The millionaires who donate to reform have just moved back to Britain. Got around that one. But it seems to me this is kind of blown up in Burnham's face because he's had to backtrack on this particular piece of proposed legislation because it would put him foul of the unions, including, say, for instance, the GMB union, which has handed more than £2.4 million to various arms of the party. And there are people saying, well, what really is the difference? You have one private billionaire who might say, I like a bit of crypto. Can you maybe think about doing some legislation to that effect? Compared to some of these unions who come up with a whole raft of, I think, quite radical ideas. We don't want to pay any attention to the legislation on single-sex spaces. You know, we want Gaza and Palestine everywhere, boycott Israel, you know, various strikes that cripple the country's economy, and have for a long time had the whip hand over the Labour Party.
Well, he's certainly flip-flopped on it. But I have to say, Alex, I mean, I'm a trade union man, you know that, and I'm glad he's flip-flopped on it in many ways. I'm uneasy about the idea of a cap on donations for anybody, I have to say, whether it's a businessman giving money to the Tories or Reform, or, you know, the trade unions giving money to the Labour Party. I think that if you are an organisation or an individual who has made a decision to give your own money because you believe in a particular political party, you believe in their programme, you should be free to do that within reason, provided, and this is the key thing, it's absolutely open, it's absolutely transparent. People don't try to launder it in a way that, you know, conceals the true source of the payment, which I think probably we've seen in some cases over recent years. And if you are willing to spend your money on that, then that's fine by me, as long as everybody knows about it and the public have access to that information. I would say, actually, when it comes to trade unions, it is in many respects the cleanest money in politics. You know, trade unions are subject to very, very robust legislation. They have to have very, very robust reporting mechanisms when it comes to their finances. Members of unions are allowed by law to inspect the accounting records of trade unions. I know that because that's something I've done myself through my own union. And it's not with trade unions, it's not an individual rich businessman giving the money. The money comes, of course, from the subscription fees of thousands of members. And of course, there is something called the political fund, where members are entitled to opt out of it if they don't want their money going to a political party. So yes, it is a flip-flop, and the optics of that are not good, but I'm glad that he's done it, because I think people and organisations should be free to fund political parties in the way that they wish.
Tell you what else, if you're going to play a game of political snap, you might find Reform and Labour suddenly have in common. It's not really been spoken about much in the wider press, and I think it is very worthwhile bringing up, which is there's a certain new MP who won a by-election recently who failed to declare a gift in the 12 months before taking office. Now, it might be that Nigel Farage's particular sum was £5 million, which is big, but Andy Burnham's was quite peculiar. We know that Nigel Farage got £5 million, he says, to pay for security. We know where it came from, Christopher Harborne. What is going on with Andy Burnham and this VIP party in Osaka? Because if I were to weigh up the two, if any of them looks a bit funny in terms of, well, what are you doing there? Whose back are you going to scratch in return for hosting you for some sort of dubious reason? Do you think that this revelation that Burnham, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter the amount you're given, the crime is the same, isn't it? The allegation, the mistake, the accusation is the not declaring it. So we find ourselves in a position where Nigel Farage and Andy Burnham have essentially being accused of having perpetrated the same offence.
You have to be consistent. Excuse me. You have to be consistent in politics. And, you know, it's all very well when you're in opposition, for example, lambasting the government of the day for any particular example of sleaze. And Tony Blair made this point recently. There's a thing called the boomerang effect. And that means that, yes, you can do all of that and you can paint yourself as whiter than white. But as sure as God made little apples, when you get into power, there will always be examples where you or one of your cabinet colleagues or whoever it is has done something that crosses the line, and there will be accusations of sleaze thrown at you. And if you made certain demands about, you know, heads should roll when it was the other side, and, you know, it shows how sleazy they are, you've got to expect people to throw the same bricks at you. And Angela Rayner was a good example of that. She made great play when she was in opposition of any infraction by any Tory cabinet minister in terms of sleaze and demanding that they resign. Well, that's okay. But of course, when she was in power and there was the whole issue of the tax and the house that she was an owner of, and the fact that she didn't pay sufficient tax, she kind of held on and tried to defend that before it eventually became inevitable that she was going to have to resign. So I just kind of think that political parties, when it comes to this, yes, it is important that our politics is clean and the money that's funding our politics is clean and open and transparent, but be very careful about consistently and quite often hysterically painting the other side as, you know, as if all of the devils are on one side and all of the angels are on your side. Because when it comes back and you're in the spotlight, as Andy Burnham is, then people will legitimately say, well, hang on a second, you demanded resignation or, you know, sanction of this person. What are you going to do about it? And people are quite right to highlight that, I think.
Let's talk now about the fact that welfare reform is now going to be delayed until after the budget. We know that this is probably the greatest onus on our economy today. We know that IMF at one point a couple of years ago said you've got to cut the amount you spend on welfare because you're too big to bail out. We know that when the Welfare Reform Act was put in front of Parliament under Sir Keir Starmer, Labour backbenchers flatly refused to back it. We know it's essentially a ticking time bomb as national debt is set to soar above $1 trillion any day now. And yet Andy Burnham is delaying it until next year at the earliest. Surely this is playing with fire. Is he running frit of his backbenchers already?
Well, look, I'm on the left. I believe in a generous welfare system, but I've always believed that the system needs to be, in the old saying, it needs to be a safety net and not a comfort blanket. And I think there's a general belief, correctly in my view, that in recent years, particularly when you look at the exploding welfare bill, and it's not an exaggeration to say that, I mean, it really has exploded, and it is, as you say, a ticking time bomb. That it has actually gone from being a safety net into a comfort blanket, which was not actually the intention of the original founders of the welfare state back in the post-war Labour government. And my concern is not just the financial side of it, but my concern is the dependency culture that actually flows from that. And when you have a situation where you have 1, 2, sometimes 3 generations in a family, and there is no, if you like, tradition of people in full-time and regular employment, then it becomes endemic within families and can actually become endemic within entire communities, where people think almost the default position is that the state will provide for you. There's no real incentive or obligation to work other than if you come across a particular job and you strike lucky. And that's not healthy. People need agency in life. They need to know that they're productive members of society. Work, I think, is a good thing for people in terms of not not just their financial well-being, but in terms of their emotional well-being and the socialization it gives to people and so on. But I also think at the same time, Alex, it's important to recognise that there are probably quite a lot of people out there who would like good, decent, rewarding, well-paid jobs and strive hard to find one. Lots of our young people at the moment, you read stories of people making hundreds of applications because they do want to get off their backsides and work and often don't get a reply. So we have to say, yes, we do need to reform the welfare system, but equally we need to give people good, rewarding jobs, and that means fundamentally rebalancing the economy.
Yeah, I mean, indeed, talking about that, there are stark new figures out today that show that 1 million young people are not in work or education. 1 in 8 of 16 to 24-year-olds, which is pretty alarming. Andy Burnham says he's going to tackle it. We'll have to see about that. But something else that Andy Burnham has lighted upon of late, which I didn't realise was such an important pressing issue on the doorstep, is cowboy builders. I mean, look, nobody likes a crook. Nobody likes a rogue trader, which is why we have various websites set up where you can give Google reviews and leave testimonies and, you know, various organisations which purport to rubber stamp tradespeople. And here he is, Andy Burnham, doing a big op-ed today in the Mail, talking about cowboy builders, saying they rob our neighbours of their futures. They destroy our lives. They take a big deposit, do half a job, disappear with your hard-earned money. I mean, Paul, we have such huge crises in this country, and I'm not saying that crooked traders are not a problem. And actually, if it happens to you and someone said they're going to build your conservatory, nick 40,000 grand, disappear off and leave your, you know, garden looking like a meteoroid has struck it, that is not deeply distressing and horrible. But we have trading standards legislation. We have various things in place. I just kind of feel like, yet again, it's very parochial, very pedestrian, and he is running away from the most taxing issues facing us, like the welfare bill, like immigration, like geopolitical threats to our domestic shores.
Well, I agree with you completely on that, and I wrote a piece recently where I said something similar. It seemed, look, and he's right on the issue itself, on the substantive issue. Of course, you know, we want to tackle cowboy builders. My concern with Burnham is he seems still to be locked in the mindset of a city mayor, where he's concentrating on, as you rightly described them, parochial issues, the sorts of, you know, buses, for example. He's constantly banging on about buses. Not an unimportant issue in and of themselves, but not one of the big kind of strategic macroeconomic issues that are confronting the country at the moment. And I think someone needs to take him aside and say, look, all of this kind of tinkering at the edges, which with stuff that really should be handled by junior ministers in many respects, who are making these announcements, you know, doing these PR visits and so on. Andy, you're the Prime Minister, you're the First Lord of the Treasury. You need to get back to the big macroeconomic issues, the big strategic issues. You need to be talking about employment, you need to be talking about jobs, you need to be talking about growth, you need to be talking about investment, you need to be talking about the real economy, about manufacturing, how we're going to address some of the very real problems facing this country, whether it's small boats, the ongoing sort of social disintegration that we're experiencing and so on. And if he keeps kind of focusing on this smaller time parochial stuff, then come the election, people will still see that on the bigger issues, the country hasn't changed fundamentally, and consequently Labour won't deserve, or he won't deserve, as the Prime Minister another term. Someone needs to hammer that message home to him sooner rather than later, frankly.
Mate, it just goes to show how low grade they are up in the creche of the north. He's a blimmin' municipal pipsqueak, isn't he? He'd be better positioned to run the local village fete. Paul, thank you ever so much. Always a pleasure to catch up with you. I'll tell you what, though. I'll tell you what, folks. Sometimes it just writes itself, doesn't it? Here we go. Let's read what Burnham's written about the problem with cowboys. Huh? Who's a cowboy then, Mr. Burnham? He talks about them preying on the vulnerable, robbing neighbours of their futures, destroying lives. I don't know, what, like putting illegal immigrants into HMOs in every street in Britain? He says they take a big deposit, do half a job and disappear with your hard-earned money. That's right, sounds like Rachel Reeves and now Ed Miliband, quite frankly, taking all of our cash, increasing taxes and doing what with it? Giving it to random foreigners and net zero? Crying out loud. He says that we should all have our money held safely and released bit by bit as the work is completed. No, you're chucking our taxpayers' cash on barely even servicing the interest on the astronomical debt your government has run up. And then he has the audacity to say the kind of country we're trying to build together, a country built on fairness. That's right, where illegal immigrants go top of the list when it comes to getting social houses, while the vulnerable single mother has nowhere to raise her children. Fairness, my backside. There's no such thing in this nation. If you're white and working class, you're scum of the earth, you're bottom of the blimmin' pile. He says we should expect to be treated fairly too. When you aren't, you should expect your government to be on your side. Look in the mirror, son. If anyone's a cowboy matey boy, it's you. Right. On that note, I'm going to take a little break, have a cup of tea, and on the other side of it, we're going to be talking about probably the most egregious issue in politics today, which is immigration. It never goes away because no one ever does anything about it. That's coming up just after this.
I do not care about Meghan and Harry. I do not care at all. Not a gnat's backside do I care. Not at all. If they walked in this room, I'd say, get out. I don't care about Meghan and Harry. Can I put that any more emphatically? I do not care. I love Angela Levin, but I don't care about Meghan and Harry, all right? It doesn't keep me awake at night. I don't wake up in the morning going, I wonder what Megs is up to. Never, ever does it cross my mind. I don't give a hoot about Meghan and Harry.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
I just got a message from Kevin O'Sullivan. He does this all the time. He watches everyone's shows and then pings them his thoughts on what they're saying. Oh, he's one of our most avid fans of his own channel. He's just said, remember us Brits who hate tea? No, I'd rather forget you exist. I consider you blasphemic. I consider you sort of traitors. Extremely strong black coffee, no sugar. It's the way forward. Sounds up to me like the route to cardiac arrhythmia. No, thank you. Let the continent drink that muck. I'm a tea girl, 100%. Ugh. OK. Right, let's talk about immigration, shall we? Because it's a story that never goes away. And welcome aboard HMS Common Sense, Kim Bailey, chairwoman of Crowborough Shield. Now,
Hi, Alex.
Crowborough, you guys have really been on the front line when it comes to having all these lovely cultural enrichers, you know, who are so esteemed and overly educated, who should be promoted to the highest echelons of society. I bet you love them now, don't you? Enjoying themselves, roaming freely around the local area. Now, Kemi Badenoch has had the audacity to say that we're not a hotel in this country and that she's going to crack down on immigration, that she's going to leave the ECHR, deport everyone who came here illegally. And the problem is, right, that we've just learnt that one migrant is being granted permanent settlement or citizenship every single minute during the 3-month period leading up to June. Now, those people, who therefore will have been here for 5 years, were all let in under a Conservative government who failed to get the Rwanda plan, literally as well as figuratively, off the ground because they decided to call a snap election instead. The Conservative Party, who failed to stop the boats. The Conservative Party, who could have left the ECHR for the 15 years that they had a majority. The Conservative Party. So I'm not sure I really buy this appeal to voters saying that we are not a hotel, because that seems to be what every single successive government has treated us as.
Yeah, I think you'll find they're quite carefully chosen words by Kemi Badenoch in that she's going to return every illegal immigrant. So as we all keep getting told, they are only illegal as they step ashore. As soon as they claim asylum, they're no longer illegal. So in order for Kemi to actually fulfil that promise, I think she's only going to have to deport a handful of people. So I would be very reluctant to actually buy into that narrative. Obviously, I'd like to see it happening, whether it will or not. And as you've just said, Alex, 15 years they've been able to, or have had the opportunity to get this problem under control, and they haven't. And now we've got this Labour government that just don't seem interested at all. I mean, you're talking one every minute. That's over 500,000 a year if that continues. I know we're only talking about a 3-month period, but that's still 30-odd thousand. I mean, just doing a quick Google search, you can see that France take on sort of 35 to 45,000 asylum seekers each year. They approve that many. Spain, it's less. Italy, similar numbers. You know, and we're talking 500,000. We just cannot take that many people. There needs to be a system in place. There needs to be, they need to address this root cause problem. I think Labour are lying constantly and fudging figures. I mean, if you look at, I think the Home Office have put something out today about 71% drop in asylum seekers coming here, and actually and they've also talked about the cost of asylum dropping. This cannot be real. What I think they're doing is very similar to what Sadiq Khan did, where they fudged the figures and said knife crime had come down, and what they'd actually done was take a few figures out, and they were investigated, and that wasn't true. You know, we've got, I think when we were first applying for our judicial review, 53,000 people had absconded from the asylum system. So are they being counted as part of these asylum seekers in terms of applications being reduced? I think what you'll find is that their figures are really, really disingenuous.
I totally agree. They do everything they can to massage the figures. They try and say, oh, there's far fewer people in the asylum backlog. Yeah, because you make them all citizens, and Lord knows who they even are. There are some cases which, to me, are just utterly ridiculous. This being one of them. Now, I have sympathy for this individual. It's a Kenyan woman who has been temporarily reprieved from deportation after a judge ruled that the original decision did not consider the shame she faced over being branded a witch. Apparently, she was in an unhappy polygamous relationship when her partner's other wife died, which resulted in her being accused of witchcraft. She then fled Kenya for the UK. Her asylum application was rejected. It then transpired that she didn't mention these accusations until she realised her case was hopeless. The woman, now 63, has been allowed to have her case reheard after an appeal tribunal ruled that the original judge had not taken into account the shame and trauma she felt over the accusations. Now, on one hand, I feel sorry for this woman, and I doubt that she's going to be particularly much of a threat to society. I doubt she's going to go on some sort of rape rampage or end up in county lines. Although, being a 63-year-old woman who's been accused of witchcraft, it makes me think she's probably not of the educated upper echelons of Nairobi society. She's unlikely to be of net economic benefit to the country. And the thing is this, OK? I lived in Kenya I know what goes on in Kenya. A lot of weird things happen in Kenya. They still got FGM, for instance. They've got, especially in the very tribal, remote parts of that country, all sorts of madness, right? There's not really electricity. People live in mud huts and they jump as high as they can with a lion's neck skin on their heads. I've seen it with my own eyes because I lived there and ran the presidential campaign there, and I'm well versed on the societal issues. But this is a Kenyan problem. When I lived in Kenya, you could open up a national newspaper and there'd be adverts for voodoo and witchcraft. Go and see a shaman, you know, smash a chicken egg and you might be able to have like 10 years of wealth. You know, that goes on in Kenya. But that is Kenya's thing to deal with, not ours.
I agree. I think if someone's application has been rejected on their own merits, to start then bringing in new stuff in an appeal, which could have been, you know, presented at that first case, I don't think it's right that that new information is then brought in, because I think, as we've seen recently, a lot of lawyers were saying things like, or encouraging a lot of these applicants to just say they were gay and therefore they can't be sent back. So I think there's a lot of irregular work going on in the legal system that needs to be addressed alongside all of this, because as we know, some of these claims, I think a few years back, perhaps a couple of decades, it was over chicken nuggets. There are all sorts, and cats, you know, there has got to be some common sense to applications. They've all got to be dealt with on their own merit, but there's got to be common sense applied. And I think it needs to be regulated a little bit more than what it currently is, because it is being exploited. Our legal system is being exploited from the top to the bottom, and that's not fair. And on top of that, us as taxpayers, we're also funding this. And that, again, is probably another cost that has been excluded. When they say the asylum costs have gone down, I expect they're not actually including legal aid costs for all of these asylum application rejections, appeals, etc. So again, more disingenuous stuff there, but it needs addressing. It's the whole thing just needs to be overhauled from the bottom right up to the top.
I totally agree. I think it's totally egregious that you can use taxpayers' money via legal aid, and we pay for both the government to say someone should be deported and the person arguing against it saying no, I shouldn't, and they get 4 or 5 rolls of the dice. The answer should be no the first time. Off you jolly well.
We also know that Shabana Mahmood has absolutely no interest in reducing the costs of any legal fees. I mean, we took her to court, to the High Court, for a judicial review, and you know, the money that they have spent on putting the Crowborough camp together, you know, £15 million in that first quarter, money is just not even real to this woman. She's just spending it willy-nilly. She has absolutely no care for the taxpayer whatsoever. She needs to go. The whole government needs to go, because I don't think they're being honest about anything. And the fact that this all comes to light, I mean, look, like I said, Sadiq Khan trying to hide the knife crime figures, it's all going to come out in the wash in the end. They should just stand down and call it.
Oh, what are you talking about, Kim? Blimmin' Andy Pandy's on top of everything. He's going to make sure there's no rogue builders working anywhere near Crowborough. Tell me, how are things in Crowborough? Because it's been a while since we caught up. You're at the coalface. What's it like in the neighbourhood these days?
Well, we see a lot of blue lights. There's a lot of ambulances that come and go from the camp. Obviously, we don't know what's going on inside there. I attend a non-governmental organisation meeting with the Home Office, which I'm not allowed to talk about, so I can't talk anything about that. We know the camp is now almost at capacity. We know that knives have been found outside the camp. The police were actually called to come and retrieve some of these handmade weapons as well. They're all being found outside the camp. Again, they've got this zero tolerance, zero policy to alcohol and drugs on the site. So what that means is it's out in the street. We know they sit over in the golf course, a lot of litter. Again, just drugs, alcohol, antisocial behaviour. We've seen them around the town, very drunk, in the kids' playgrounds. It's not nice. And the fact that no one is addressing this, you can't just keep moving people into these types of accommodation. Our cadets, again, like we say, they were evicted. Nothing has been sorted for them. They're trying to get them to actually go back onto the camp. Parents are saying this is not safe. You can't put our children at risk like this. But again, Shabana Mahmood doesn't care. She just wants her image on the media to be one of, we fix this problem. Look, the cadets are back in. Actually, no, they're not. They're not back in, and they don't want to go back in because there is a huge risk. She doesn't seem to grasp anything about communities. That woman does not seem to understand what she's doing to the fabric of this town, Piddington, all the other towns doing this too. It's terrible. It is absolutely terrible what that woman is doing. And this whole government, it's not just Shabana Mahmood, is it? It's Andy Burnham now as well, Keir Starmer previously.
Ah, well, who needs to train our young cadets to make and use weapons when we've got all these wonderful, upstanding gentlemen coming in from the Maghreb and the Middle East who are doing that
Big doctors
instead?
and surgeons and
There they
engineers,
are.
according to Rachel Millward.
There they are. I can't, I can't wait for them to fight in defence of our nation. Kim, thank you ever so much. Keep up the good work. You're brilliant. OK. By the way, if you want to get in touch about anything we're talking about today, let me remind you of the numbers. 03444 999 1000 is the number to send me a voice note on WhatsApp. Has anyone done that yet? Why not? I've got one. I've got a voice note. Oh, I'll do that before the advert break then. You can also send me just a normal routine text-based WhatsApp as well. That's also the number to dial if you want to have a chit-chat, because the last quarter hour of the programme we will be taking some calls. 87222 is the number to send a text. Before we go to break, let's play that voice note, shall we? This is Jane.
Morning, Alex. Andy Burnham, he is a bit of a puzzle, isn't he? You know, you've got Russia threatening to bomb us. You've got illegal migrants pouring over the channel. How many were there yesterday? About 500. You've got booklets coming out for don't rape our children. But in Andy Burnham's world, he wants to strum a guitar and decide which bar snacks he wants to eat. This guy could not be taken seriously in a beep in a brewery. Honestly, this country is going down the tubes.
He's an emoji. He's not a prime minister. He's a cartoon on a Corex board, for crying out loud. Most useless prime minister since forever. Kind of, do you know, every time we get a new prime minister, I find myself missing the one before that I used to think was utterly horrific. And then you suddenly go with Andy Burnham. My God, at least Sir Keir Starmer seemed like a serious character. I hated him. He was evil and wicked. But at least he was an adult. What is Burnham? He should be working in a kindergarten. I think that's pretty much what he's set up in the North, isn't it? That number 10 of the North with their beanbags and their cardboard cutouts of Larry the Cat. Grow up. It's a blimmin' hemp knitting circle. OK, right, we're going to be taking a break now. And then on the other side, well, if anything's going to induce mental illness, is living in the 21st century. But apparently it is massively escalating. Well, that's according to the amount of money that NHS is now spending on ADHD and autism tests, which have risen tenfold. But is there really a tenfold rise in such conditions? It's an interesting topic of conversation. We're going to be investigating that with former NHS Trust Chairman Roy Lilly just after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
What's your acronym? What have you got? OCD? PTSD, ADHD. It seems like you have to be insane these days or have some sort of clinical diagnosis for a mental health condition. Everyone's got a blimmin' acronym, don't they? But is there really a huge uptick in people with these conditions? Are we over-identifying them? Have they become a little bit too vogue? And is NHS spending on ADHD and autism rising tenfold a good idea? What is actually going on? Well, let's see if we can get close to the truth with former NHS Trust Chairman Roy Lilly. Roy, I kind of feel with this, it's a bit like trying to identify whether something is red while wearing red-tinted glasses, because we've got a sort of whole new system now where everybody's encouraged to go online and do a test, and are you on the spectrum, and do you have this condition? And so it's kind of, you know, a lot of the characteristics of these things, it's a bit like when you read a horoscope, you're like, oh, that sounds a bit like me. But then on the other side, I do look at the way that kids, especially now, are brought up entirely digitally, glued to screens, being bombarded with short videos, which changes the way dopamine is released in the brain. They're not going out and forming normal societal constructive relationships, climbing trees and making actual friends, but are being sort of, you know, having their plastic minds manipulated by constantly wormholing on social media. So I'm not really sure where we're at with this one. What do you think is going on? Ooh, where is Roy? That felt like some sort of Bohemian Rhapsody video then. There was like a sort of swathe of multiple Alexes. Have you thought, what it would be like to have me and my various quadruplet siblings all in the same room at once? That was the moment. That is definitely enough to give someone some sort of mental health acronym. That is for sure. Let me give you my theory on this, because I was writing about this just the other day, that I genuinely think that social media and the digitisation of society at large has radically dehumanised individuals. And I actually support moves to restrict the amount of online access that under 16s have. That's the period of life as an adolescent where you really do need to be forming those societal bonds and developing emotional relationships and becoming responsive to things. Times when the sort of chemical balances in your brain and the generation of hormones are going through a massive upheaval. And so I genuinely think that there are what I would call sort of environmentally induced mental health disorders. And a lot of it could be dealt with by, I don't know, turning off the blimmin' phone and going for a walk in the park and being a normal human rather than being dehumanised by algorithms. But also at the same time, I think there has been this sort of overhyping of mental health where it's now become trendy to have some sort of prognosis when it comes to mental health. We've got Roy back, you'll be pleased to hear, rather than me waffling along about what the Alex philosophy is on this. Roy, what we know is that autism and ADHD spending on the NHS has risen tenfold. What do you think is going on here?
Okay, good morning. Look, there's two issues here. One is the condition or the conditions themselves. They're on the increase across Europe. Here we have a very knowledgeable panel of experts looking at it, led by Sir Simon Wesley, who's the former chair of the Royal College of Psychiatry. The answer is the profession doesn't really know, and the panel that's looking at it now, I don't know when they're supposed to have produced a report this summer. I mean, we're fast running out of summer. I think, you know, September is probably the end of summer, and we should expect their report anytime now. I don't know when it's going to come, and they've played their cards very close to their chest. I don't know what it's going to say, but I think it is a case of bafflement for the professions as well. There's some hints about COVID, maybe not, we don't know. The second part of it is the costs. Now, what has happened here is that NHS mental health facilities are just simply overwhelmed by the number of people coming through wanting a diagnosis or wanting to talk to an expert. The difficulty with that is because we don't have enough capacity headroom in the NHS, people can then ask to go to be seen privately. They are being seen privately, and the cost per consultation are ranging from £300 to £3,000 because there is no NHS tariff to pay people to look into whether or not people need a clinical medical diagnosis. So if you look at, for example, cataract operations, more than half of NHS cataract operations are now done in the private sector, but they're done at NHS tariff. We know how much it costs. There's no argument. There's a proper format. With this, because it's caught everybody unawares, there is no tariff for this. And frankly, the NHS is being ripped off. The difficulty is deciding what the tariff is before we've decided what the illness is and decided what we're looking for. So the whole thing is a mess. There is another word for it, but we'll use a mess for now.
I mean, when you look at the sheer cost, we talk about it rising tenfold, but let's put this into context, where one particular ICB described costs as rising from £2 million in 23 to 24 to £9 million from 2024 to 2025 to 21
it's gone
million.
Up. Yeah.
I mean, that is absolutely insane. The time period is extremely short. And the problem I have with this is, you go online, you go onto Instagram or Facebook or even just pop-up adverts, on generic websites, and they seem to all be saying, do you think you've got a disorder? Do you want to take a personality test? I'll tell you what, Roy, I sit here and I fiddle with a pen. They go mad at me in the gallery. They're like, put the pen down, you're making a noise. I can't watch a film without also either playing solitaire on my phone or doing a cryptic crossword simultaneously. I'm a problem sleeper. I have very little social filter. And so some people might say, I think you've got autism. I think you've got ADHD. I've never felt the need to go and do an online test or go to a doctor because, I don't know, I have a productive existence. I'm in a job, I get paid. That's just the way I'm wired up. It's not necessarily the same as everyone else, but I don't find that to be particularly problematic. Yeah. And I worry that we now live in a society where we've pushed the concept of mental health so much that it is swallowing up a huge amount of welfare, that those who are out of work on sickness benefits are largely the 18, 20 to 24-year-olds, and it's often for reasons of anxiety, autism, ADHD, that people can claim PIP claimants and motability cars off the back of these diagnoses. It seems to be becoming some sort of industrial complex.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I don't think I'd argue with anything you said, and I get into trouble for wiggling my glasses and clicking that. I'm a grumpy old geezer. Perhaps I need a diagnosis as well. You're right. There is a great deal about this that the profession simply does not know and understand, and that's why there is the importance of the Wesley report when it comes out. Maybe we'll find out a bit more, maybe we won't. I mean, I don't know what stones they're going to turn over and what they're going to find underneath it. But there's the confluence of two things here. One is the medical professional, the psychiatric profession don't really understand what is happening or the causology or the causes of it. And secondly, the NHS has been caught on the back foot because it has no reference point for payment. Now, you could say, well, the NHS is useless and it needs to pull itself together. Actually, this is a ministerial issue. Ministers have got to decide what the NHS will pay for and what it won't. And so that's a matter really for the Secretary of State for Health. She's only been in office for a few weeks, and I guess there's a lot on her plate. My guess is they'll wait for the Wesley report, then they'll fiddle around with it. There'll be a consultation. The NHS will spend a few more millions, and eventually we'll end up with a tariff and some sort of order to this. But at the moment, it's just chaotic.
Do you know, one of the last times you and I spoke, Roy, we were talking about the abolition of NHS England. Do you remember that? That didn't happen, did it? Because today's news story from NHS England, which still exists, is that the chairman, Dr. Penny Dash, has said that we really need to look at India as an exemplar of good healthcare. And when I think about that, India's a country that we drive millions of pounds to in foreign aid, millions. And yet, when it comes to the production of generic medicine, when it comes to the digitisation of people's medical records, when it comes to technologising healthcare, deploying AI in areas such as diagnostics, disease surveillance and the management of health services, they're leagues above us.
Well, look, Penny Dash first made these comments in 2014 at a conference that I was at, and I still have a copy of her slides. And what she was doing, she was referring to something there where they do in India, where They have regional, for example, regional cataract centres where people wait until they've got, a couple of hundred people that need cataract operations, and then they do them all in one place on the same day. It's very efficient. It's a huge step forward for healthcare in India. But India put about 1.2% of GDP, I think, into healthcare. The rest of it is paid for out of pocket by people themselves. If you look at health outcomes, the outcomes are really awful in many instances. Wealthy people there, of course, look after themselves, but the general population health is pretty poor. If you look at the technology and the IT, well, the NHS is doing all this now. It doesn't make a song and dance about it, but if you look at GP consultations, nearly 60% of them now are done on the telephone, because everybody finds that very convenient. It creates headroom then for people who want to sit down and talk to the GP. I was at a consultation just recently at London Hospital. I went in, had the consultation with the consultant, got the tube home. By the time I got home, on my NHS app, I had a full report of the consultation. And it went into my notes electronically. So, these are the kind of technological advances that there are. We now have virtual hospitals where people can be looked after at home safely. There's a huge amount of technology going on. And to say that, India is going to be an exemplar, well, look, India may be an exemplar for some of the poorer countries where the healthcare system isn't as good as it could be, but it's not really an exemplar for developed European healthcare systems. And as I say, Penny's been saying this since 2014.
Yeah, no, I think one of the areas where India does get things right is the production of generic medicines. And unfortunately, while we still tether to EU competition regulations and so on and so forth, they've been one of the worst for allowing the cartels of Big Pharma to keep costs of medicines artificially high.
Actually, if I could just say quickly, I know we're out of time, and the answer, I'm afraid, is no. It's a longer discussion, but over 70% of medicines prescribed in the UK are generic.
Yeah, it is a very interesting conversation, actually, that one. We should actually get back together and do that at some point in the future, Roy. It's always a privilege to have you on the programme, one of the most sensible speaking men when it comes to the management of the NHS. OK, we are going to be taking a short break now. On the other side, it's time for messages and calls. So roll up. 0344 499 1000 is the number to hit up on your phone if you want to be transferred to the studio. 87222 if you want to send a text like the word talk before your message. You can also send me a WhatsApp on the long number 0344 499 1000. Back after this.
I do not care about Meghan and Harry. I do not care at all. Not a gnat's backside, do I? Not at all. If they walked in this room, I'd say, get out. I don't care about Meghan and Harry. Can I put that any more emphatically? I do not care. I love Angela Levin, but I don't care about Meghan and Harry, all right? It doesn't keep me awake at night. I don't wake up in the morning going, I wonder what Megs is up to. Never, ever does it cross my mind. I don't give a hoot about Meghan and Harry.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Now, how do you know when the assailant of a sexual crime is white? Because the police tell you. Not that I think that this is a comical matter at all. A grotesque crime. A poor young woman in her 20s was approached by an unknown man as she walked through the crowded streets of Shaftesbury Avenue, Cambridge Circus and Drury Lane in the early hours of Saturday, the 22nd of August. The man dragged her into a doorway. The victim managed to flee the scene, submitted the report to the police. But here we go. Detectives immediately conducted urgent inquiries, gathered CCTV, which shows the man near Drury Lane, who is described as white, aged between 25 to 35, with short, dark hair. There he is. That is our disgusting sexual predator on your screen. If you have information, I do, in fact, urge you to contact the Metropolitan Police. But why is it, when the assailant doesn't fit that particular description, do we not seem to get the CCTV released? I once was told by somebody who works within the Met Police that there was a crackdown. At one point, they used to have on their social media accounts appeals for public information. And they realised when all of the appeals seemed to fit particular demographics that it might look a little bit racist, so they stopped appealing for public information and giving vital descriptions to try and catch evil people that commit such wicked crimes. But there you go. There's always a picture when the assailant does not fit the description of one of our more recent entries to the country. Let's do a very quick call before we go to break. Let's have a catch-up with Rob in Cheshire. Hi, Rob.
Hello, how are we doing?
I'm very well. How are you?
Not bad, not bad.
What's on your mind, darling?
Yeah, about South Bank and Grangetown. I was brought up in Redcar.
Middlesbrough, this is, with the gang violence. Yeah.
That's it, yeah. So Middlesbrough's 10 miles away, South Bank, Grangetown, 7 miles away from Redcar. And so, as kids, we were always told, don't go anywhere near South Bank or Grangetown. When we were like 18 years old, going to Middlesbrough to go for a night out, don't go past South Bank or Grangetown. And it's always been the same, and I'm showing my age now, but so that was like 40 years ago. So the gangs and stuff like that has always been the same. It's always been a really rough place. And, a bit of history on the place. The two major employers were ICI and...
Yeah, my grandfather worked at ICI. I know it well. I used to be a reporter for ITV Tyne Tees, actually. Used to be based at their Billingsgate office for a while. Is it Billingsgate? Billingham office for a while, which was in some sort of porter cabin on the old site of ICI. But this is it. Deindustrialisation, social deprivation breeds long-term endemic problems, such as the sort of gangland criminality that Rob there is describing. Unfortunately, Rob, I'm going to have to love you and leave you. We've run out of time, but we haven't run out of time for the end of the show. 1 more hour to go, so do join me just after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. The final hour of the show. Doesn't time fly when you're having a good old moan, a bit of communal catharsis, as I like to say. Now, there we were before the break talking about the huge uptick in people wanting diagnoses for mental health conditions. You don't need to go and do that. You can just come for some free therapy with Agony Aunt Alex, can't you? We get it all off our chest together, and it makes us all feel better that we're not going mad, but we just live in a mad world, a Mad Max world, as I keep saying. That's my latest sort of Phillipsism there. Let's do a few messages before we go on to our next topic. Sarah said a great segment on Russia and security, covered in the usual depth and informative Alex speak. Well done. Happy Friday. Just a correction there, Sarah, because I've actually got my own word for Alex speak. It's a brilliant portmanteau, and it is called the Alexicon. Feel free to use that one. Alex, UK would not spend $330 billion on welfare if they had no vote. They should not be allowed to vote on how to spend taxpayers' money. Very simple. No contribution, no representation. That's why the empire broke up. I think that might be mildly hardline if you find yourself through no fault of your own outside of work, then being said, well, that's it, you don't qualify as a citizen with civic rights anymore, to me seems slightly mean-spirited. But I do think when it comes to certain cohorts who can currently vote, they definitely shouldn't be allowed to. Hi, Alex. Fast-track citizenship for illegal migrants and others with probably very few checks as to who these men are. I mean, the crime statistics can be glossed over and massaged to make it appear that any sexual crimes will be classed as being done by our own citizens, hence why the government won't release the stats on crimes by foreign criminals right now, says Alison in Glasgow. It's true, isn't it? Every time you hear reports coming from the rape gauntlet that is Bournemouth Beach, it's always, 3 men from London. Are they from London? Are they don't? They might have got the train in London. Their vehicular conveyance down to the rape gauntlet may have emanated from London, but by and large, they're almost never actually from London. And it really gets on my wick. And the government now using our taxpayers' money to fight legal battles to suppress information that is very important to us and our public safety, that would enable us to be able to decide whether or not this government's letting us down and endangering women and girls. Yes, they are. To me, is one of the most revolting things a government has done. It's purely tyrannical. Alex, hello. Why you have no building tradesmen goes back to Harold Wilson, reducing the age of consent to 18, which destroyed 5-year apprenticeships in building trade, says Nicholas in Essex. OK. I don't know anything about that, but there you go. I will just read that one out and go, OK. Because, of course, that is the most important issue in society right now. That guy who laid your patio and overcharged you for it and didn't actually use paving slabs, but myths and dreams and lies. Anyway, talking about myths and dreams and lies, what about the EU's Asylum and Migration Pact, which has been voted through by a majority? What does it entail? What does it mean for the EU? And how might this have ramifications on the United Kingdom? There's only one man to speak to when it comes to these sorts of things. We love him. He is the head of the Centre for Applied History at MCC Budapest and political theorist, Ralph Schulhammer. Hello, my lovely Ralph. Why have we not colour coordinated? Because I actually, for the first time ever, prompted you to try and match me today, because normally we do it accidentally.
I know it's unforgivable, but it's. I think I've been. This is a horrible thing to say. I've been doing so many Zoom calls. I think I've been wearing this shirt now for the last 3 days. So I promise you, we'll be color coordinated the next time.
Oh, Ralph, are you suggesting that you smell?
Well, I don't know. Your audience shall be the judge of this. As long as it doesn't look smelly, I think we're good.
It's all right. You always look gorgeous to me, young Ralph. OK, tell me about the EU's Asylum and Migration Pact, because if you're an EU member state, you might rue the day that this thing ever passed. What does it involve?
Well, even if we give this whole thing the most optimistic and positive reading for a change, right, it is still just fiddling around at the symptoms. So I always use the same comparison, but I think it's an accurate one. This is, we have an overflowing bathtub and we have now turned off the faucet. Or let me rephrase this. This is an attempt to slowly begin turning off the faucet. But all the other damage that has been done, right? I mean, the mold in the bathroom, the water dripping towards your downstairs neighbor, all these other issues, they have not been addressed yet. And many of the things like, asylum claims will be processed somewhere else. That is at the moment just, declarations of intent, but nothing has happened yet into that direction. So I'm afraid that many of the things that would be positive that are announced are not going to happen, and many of the things will just be more of the same. So it will be a slower drip, but it will still be a continuous drip, and that's the main issue.
Tell us the latest about what is going on in Ceuta. Because the day that we saw that mass invasion, there's no other word for it, invasion of the Spanish enclave, I think we all just thought this is going to go horribly wrong. And then, as per usual, the political establishment went, nothing to see here. Oh, first of all, they're all just really nice refugees. Oh, don't worry, most of them have gone home. I wonder what could have inspired them all simultaneously, 62,000 odd, if not more, to all try and break into the enclave at the same time. Nothing to see here. Definitely no coercion by foreign countries who want to use migration as a weapon of war. Definitely nothing to do with international cartels using bot farms to encourage these mass flows. Definitely nothing to do with half the fact that a lot of the social media accounts emanated from Algeria, who seem to have very cosy relations with China and Russia. But there's still videos circulating online. Of course, the legacy media are not showing these videos, where it is quite clear that that poor little beleaguered enclave is at war.
Yeah, I mean, there is a very odd thing happening, just on a more general note, that I find fascinating, right? As you know, in Spain, you have all these provinces, the Basque country and Catalonia that want to become independent. Similarly, as you have in the UK, at least a little bit, right, the Scottish independence movement, or as you had it a couple of 120 years back, as you had it with the Irish independence movement. And I find it very odd, right? You get independent from London, you get independent from Madrid, and basically you then exchange this newly won independence for Islamization. So don't get me wrong, right? But I would argue, even as a Scots person or as an Irish person, I'd much rather be, metaphorically speaking, be ruled from London or Dublin than from Mecca. But this is a little bit where the direction is going. And it's a broader issue that you mentioned. You saw it's coercion. But at some point, you can only be coerced if you allow yourself to be coerced. And here's the real issue. We have become incapable of defending our borders. And no, I'm not talking about using, lead ammunition. But you could use rubber bullets, right? The same about the dingies in the United Kingdom. Of course, you can, in a quote-unquote humane way, defend your borders. But if you say no more illegal entry, no more legal entry, right, then you have to be willing to enforce it. I know this sounds very uncomfortable, this sounds very brutal, but I promise you, if you do this, you might have a few weeks of, uncomfortable scenes, but then the traffickers and everybody else is going to get the message, and these things will stop. But unfortunately, the longer you wait, then the more aggressive and the more drastic the measures will have to be.
What is going on in Ceuta? Because from what I've seen, and you never know these days when you see a video online if it's genuine or not, but there's a suggestion that Spanish police have been using rubber bullets against Spanish protesters. But, we saw videos going on of some of these new arrivals looting shops, tearing up the infrastructure on roundabouts, trying to scale the outside of buildings and break into people's homes. There's suggestions that the local residents are asking police to escort their kids to school. I mean, and I've seen video footage of things being set fire to, that there's actually sort of vigilante troops now of the young male locals who are out there saying, we've got to defend where we live. I don't blame them.
Well, it goes back to what I said before, and I think you just mentioned it on a smaller scale. right? If you allow yourself to be cursed, or if you're the one that's easier cursed, you will be cursed. And I give a very concrete example, as you just mentioned. It is easier to imprison somebody in the United Kingdom for, a vulgar tweet or an uncomfortable tweet than it is for marching through the streets of London and calling for the caliphate. And why is that the case? Because the British guy is easily cursed, and the Islamist is not as easily cursed. And as you also said, it's easier for the government to use rubber bullets against somebody who is waving the Union Jack than somebody waving something else, because they actually might fight back, right? I mean, it's also what you see in hospitals and elsewhere. This is the big issue, that in their attempt to be welcoming and willing to compromise, the European populations have now become the ones that are being coerced into a multicultural society none of them ever voted for. But as I said before, if you allow yourself to be cursed, or as the famous saying goes, if there is mush, you push. And this is, I think, what some people have realized, and also in the political system. Who is easier to blackmail? Who is easier to silence? Why, it's the migrants and the pro-migrant NGO lobby network, or is it the British people? And I think they made that decision that it is the British people.
Now, I've read a shocking Revelations Day report that says that a migrant has been granted permanent settlement or citizenship every minute in just a 3-month window running up to June this year. That is absolutely astonishing to me, that around 150,000 people now have the same equal access. They're basically British citizens. Who are they? Well, one assumes it's a lot of people who came over in the Boris wave. One assumes it includes asylum seekers. I want the breakdown of who these people are. I want to know which nationalities they are. I want to know which religion they are. And I'll tell you for why. Because it seems to me that everything that is coming out of Andy Burnham's mouth about building more social housing, Operation Scatter, let's put a load of migrants in HMOs, it's almost to me as if the European elites are complicit in actually enabling the construction of what could, in the long term, end up as the caliphate of Europe. Why are they doing this? This is so reckless.
They are, and I mean, there's for those of you interested, there's a great book that came out in the mid-90s by Christopher Lasch with the title "The Revolt of the Elites." And this is what we currently are experiencing. It's a revolution by the elites against, quote unquote, the common people, or the population, whatever then you want to ultimately call it. And the reason why they're doing this, and I mentioned this before, because there's always the idea that it's a handful of people that pulls the strings in the background. But that is only partially true. It is an entire milieu, right? It's an entire class in the universities, in media, that has been marinated in this idea that, feeling a connection to your home country, to your soul, to your traditions, to your civilization is uncouth, it's vulgar, it's bigoted. So they will always prefer the strange, the foreign, to the thing that is their own. There's a beautiful term coined by a British philosopher, by Roger Scruton, right, which is called oikophobia. It's an irrational fear of your own. So what do you do if you, quote unquote, irrationally fear your own? You import more and more people from somewhere else. Of course, they are never confronted with the consequences, because their kids go to private schools. They work in, I don't know, the finance sector and somewhere else, where these people that come over on the dingies, they will never get in touch or in contact with them. But of course, the working class does. But it is time, I cannot stress this enough, and whether it's restore, whether it's reform, whoever your choice ultimately is, people need to make their voices heard at the voting booth. And don't be demoralized. I mean, that's my message to the Austrian, to the German, but also to the British voter. You guys, the voter, your viewers, your listeners, you're ahead of the curve. You just can't allow yourself to be demoralized. So when they tell you nothing is going to change, Farage can't do anything differently, it's just going to be more of the same. No, it's not. The reason why they fight against him and those new movements is because they know that they would do things differently. And you know what? Let's find out. If it should turn out that they don't do things differently, then we have to find somebody else. But you need to make your voice heard. You need to go out. You need to mobilize. You need to organize, and you have to make sure that other people, new ideas, new visions come into office, and not just into office, but actually into power.
Talking about that, give me a little whistle-stop tour of how we're looking around Europe, would you? Because I see that, you know, Santiago Abascal of Vox in Spain, they've been having a big surge, understandably, after what happened in Ceuta. The French presidential campaign is sort of beginning to sort of slowly gear up ahead of next year. They've decided Marine Le Pen can stand after all while wearing her ankle tag, I think because they looked at Jordan Bardela's polling and predictions and any sort of presidential runoff and realised that he was going to absolutely smash it. I have a feeling she will as well. It does seem to me that political change is on the horizon. And then you look at somewhere like Germany, where the AfD in the east of the country are polling well over 40%, where they're actually now the majority party in Berlin, but the powers that be are trying to ban them from actually standing in elections. The police and the army have said if they come into office, we're going to down tools and quit our jobs. And so it sort of feels to me that even when we are on the cusp of potentially finally having some form of democratic solution, the sort of muscularity of the European superstate or whatever it is in the United Kingdom will find a way to deny us. Which countries of the ones I've sort of mentioned there, or any others in Europe, do we think could deliver us the next good right-wing populist victory?
Austria.
Yay!
No, for a very simple reason, because the right wing in Austria is actually polling at close to 40% countrywide. So they have the possibility, as it currently looks like, that they can actually form a government on their own. I mean, this is the big issue. This is my advice to all the right-wing parties in Europe. You have to make clear to the electorate, these are not just elections, they are referendums. Like every election now is a referendum on, do you want more of the same or do you want change? If you want change, you need to get closer to 40-50% and not 23%. So I encounter many people in the UK who tell me, and the same in Austria, say, I kind of share the positions of Nigel Farage, but I would never vote for him. Okay, fine, but then you will get more of the same. If you want a policy change, you need to vote for the people that promise you change. It's a referendum. It's no longer a coalition. I know the UK has a different electoral system, but even there, you know what I mean. You need solid majorities for the parties that promise change. If they can keep the promise remains to be seen, but at least they've promised change and they have not yet had a chance to deliver. I'm sorry, I like Kemi Badenoch. She seems to be a nice enough person, but I'm sorry, the Tories had their chance multiple times and they blew it multiple times. It's just, if somebody comes to you, it's like you have the husband that cheats on his wife for 10 times and then says, I promise this time was the last time. You're not gonna believe him. And the same is in politics. The message that the people of Britain and everybody else is dissatisfied with migration policies goes back to 1968 to Enoch Powell's Rivers of Blood speech or his remarks in that regard. So we're talking about over 60 years of people saying we don't want this. And plenty of parties and politicians did not deliver what the people wanted. So now we have new parties. I think it is a time to give them a chance with a solid majority. People must understand they need a solid majority. 35% is not going to be enough. They need to get closer to 40%. They need to get closer to 51%.
Yeah, it's true. If you add up the sort of, potential votes going to the Conservative Party to reform and that ridiculous entity Restore, it would potentially get us way over the 50% mark. And what saddens me in the United Kingdom is all three of those have manifestos that are carbon copies of one another. It really is an exercise in utter futility and venality as far as I'm concerned. Ralph, I love you. Thank you so much for joining us today. Let's do it again very soon. All right, let's take a short break. On the other side, let's do some calls. So if you want that to include you, the number is 0344 499 1000. It's your normal network rate. You can use that number to send me a WhatsApp message. 8722 is the number to send a text, but you have to write the word talk before you type your message. I'm back just after this.
I do not care about Meghan and Harry. I do not care at all. Not a gnat's backside, do I? Not at all. If they walked in this room, I'd say, get out. I don't care about Meghan and Harry. Can I put that any more emphatically? I do not care. I love Angela Levin, but I don't care about Meghan and Harry, all right? It doesn't keep me awake at night. I don't wake up in the morning going, I wonder what Megs is up to. Never, ever does it cross my mind. I don't give a hoot about Meghan and Harry.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
All right, let's do some messages. Alex, the NHS trusts make a fortune from making appointments. All these referrals will be in a merry-go-round of communications, making the NHS trusts a fortune without doing anything. They make a fortune? I thought they were all massively indebted. I tell you what, though, I've seen through their systems. You know, they've got this whole thing at the moment. My poor mum got arthritis, and clearly she just needs a new knee, right? She needs a new knee. It's bone rubbing on bone. Give her a new knee. No. Make her do, like, I don't know, 2 years of pointless physiotherapy first, so she doesn't have to be added to a waiting list. The woman's paid taxes all her life. She actually worked for the NHS, for crying out loud. And I can see what they do, just shuffling people around to make sure that they don't end up as a statistic. And yet they will increase tenfold, throwing money at people who think they've got an acronym because someone on Instagram told them they did. I'm sorry, that's just my read. Alex, I've had ADHD for nearly half a century. It came with my Tourette's syndrome. It is not a medical condition that needs treatment and medication. It's merely a neurological state. I am proof of these facts. In the appropriate environment, people with ADHD, what my neurologist called low-latent inhibition, can thrive, says David in Canterbury. Requests for a diagnosis of ADHD will plummet if they exempt ADHD symptoms from attracting PIP. It's just a scam, says Fiona in Middlesbrough. I agree. There's this idea of getting PIP for having... look, there are people with genuine neurological differences, right? I remember when I was at school, I actually worked at a school for kids with things like Down syndrome and Asperger's. For a short period, and these kids need extremely specialist attention. But there's so many people like that. Every day you open a newspaper, there's always some sort of woman going, I've been diagnosed with ADHD later in life. Now, everything I ever did makes sense. That's why I was a problem drinker. I'm like, no, maybe you were just a lush. Autism and ADHD increase your benefits. Also, schools get more funding as it fits into special education needs, says Thomas in Northern Ireland. Ah, there you go. Again, another industrial complex. There's very little ADHD, autism, mental health problems in Spain because there are no benefits, says Brian in Spain. Alex, spot on with limitations on social media. There are physical aspects as well as staring at a screen for hours. It will affect your eyesight. Perhaps every community should have a holiday camp like Wethersfield so kids can be off social media. Just a thought, says American Mike. Do you know, this is the thing. You actually see in real time grown adults getting mental from spending way too much time on social media. I bet you can think of a few. The celebs who all of a sudden, you know, the I've on the left doing this sort of like Dawn Veg, oh my God, and you're like, huh? Have you lost your blimmin' marbles, love? Get offline. And then you've got, John Cleese has gone a little bit excitable of late, hasn't he? But you see in real time when people get obsessed with algorithms and clicks and how many thumbs up they're getting and getting stuck in echo chambers and then starting to have fights in the comments section. And you just think, what are you doing? Put the phone down. You're going loopy-loo. Alex, did you know that PIP is not means tested? I earn 60k a year and I can claim PIP. I asked AI a couple of weeks ago which offers to help me claim and make my claim sound legit, self-diagnostic, and it even offered me made-up diaries to help with a claim. This country's definitely broken. Like I said, there's an industrial complex. You get these sickfluencers online. Loads of messages about ADHD. It seems blindingly obvious to me why so many people are being diagnosed with an ism. It's bad parenting and the lack of a healthy diet. Since Blair, we've had kids having kids who then have kids and they don't eat real food. They drink energy drinks instead of water, and kids are thrown in front of a screen instead of playing outside and using energy, says Jason in Keswick. Tend to agree with a lot of that. I still don't think we actually fully understand the impacts of ultra-processed food, microplastics, all sorts of other gubbins which have changed in the 21st century. Matthew in Cheltenham says, my son was diagnosed with ADHD years ago. I was sceptical and I still have reservations. So I watched a documentary this week on Channel 4. Aha, I know the one. It was controversial. I haven't seen it yet, but I want to watch it, where a doctor did an investigation into ADHD. I was stunned when he paid £1,200 to a quack who gave him a Zoom diagnosis, telling him that he had ADHD. He clearly did not have ADHD and said the same. These so-called doctors are snake oil salesmen, and the only ones promoting ADHD are the pharmaceutical companies. No wonder 2.5 million people are claiming mental health benefits when the whole system is set up to fleece taxpayers. That's pretty much where my thinking is on this. I have a relative who have just decided to be tested for ADHD privately, both for herself and her 18-year-old daughter, 194 quid a week each, thus £1,552 every 4 weeks, almost twice as much as my state pension. No wonder we have 700,000 more people on universal credit. Let's all watch as this country goes bankrupt. Madness. We need a general election now. I mean, this is it. Maybe I've got ADHD. I don't care. I don't think I do. I'm just, you know, I've got a lot of energy. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I can be quiet and sometimes I don't talk as much as this, although it's quite rare. But it's like a weird obsession now. It's like everyone wants to be mentally ill. Why? Why is that desirable? And it's not even just about claiming benefits. For a huge cohort it is. For others, it's like some sort of perverse badge of honour. You don't want to be mentally ill. Why would you do that? You know, go like, I'm fine, I'm me, I operate, I function, I have a job, I contribute to society, my feet are firmly on the ground, I've been well brought up, I mind my P's and Q's, and I'm not a nut job. I don't know why that's not a desirable status in today's society. I suppose it's all down to the victim hierarchy. OK, let us take some calls. Let's speak to Robert in Hertfordshire.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
I think we are all in a depression. All the normal right-leaning people, we are in mass depression. Mass depression. You know, you are almost a lunatic when you start, the same as me. You know, and we're forced into this. I think we're all in a depression, but that's not what I phoned up for. What I phoned up for is I'm fed up with being proven right by what I say. I'm sure you are, because everything you said in the past couple of years has come true. Now, I'll tell you way out of it. And I watched Isabel Oakeshott and Christian's video the other day, and it confirms what I said. Everything, all this migrant crisis and the welfare, it's all a deflection. We are being invaded. And I knew that most of the people coming over here are not paying for their ticket. It's Iran behind it. I knew this ages ago. Do you know what? Don't you get sick of being proven right all the time?
Oh, do you know what? Yeah, I kind of do and I kind of don't. I was having this moan with a mate yesterday who I bumped into at the train station, and our trains overlapped. I was about to get on the train. He was getting off the train. We happened to be having a conversation. It's like, shall we go for a glass of wine? Let's. And I kind of had a whinge because I said about, gosh, when was it, 3-4 years ago, that I went viral everywhere for saying that there was a disproportionate amount of sexual harassment coming from men from certain communities. And that clip went absolutely boom, not just in the UK, but pretty much around the world. And the backlash I got, even from people inside this building, OK, who worked at other areas, like, oh, you can't say that, oh, you're a racist, oh, you're a monster. And now, you know, everyone worth their salt is turning around, becoming an ultra-feminist. What about the safety of the young girls with all of these people coming into the country from misogynistic cultures? So it is, on some level, it grinds my gears that I, you know, got massively attacked for that, for what I said. But at the same time, I'd rather people wake up, have the scales fall away from their eyes so we can finally have this conversation and do something about it. The worst situation, Robert, is to be locked into what I call the Cassandra complex, where you know exactly what's going on, you can see what's coming down the highway, you want to warn people about it because you know, right? And they don't believe you. that, you know, you're sort of a prophet without any sort of audience, that you're like, oh my goodness, it's so predictable what's happening. It's the same way that years and years ago I kept saying that the illegal immigration is an act of grey zone warfare. They used to have a bingo card in the gallery for me mentioning Wagner mercenaries in relation to migratory flows. And now what have we found out? Oh, yeah, Wagner mercenaries are connected to migratory flows. Well, I said that. I wasn't being a conspiracy theorist. That is the worst thing. And, you know, we were talking about mental health. You started off this conversation saying we're all ill. I think you're right. And I'll tell you for why. Because successive governments have been gaslighting us on an industrial scale. When you can see a man with a girt beard and his tackle bulging through a pair of skin-tight jodhpurs saying that he's a woman, and everyone goes, yes, he is, that's a woman, and successive prime ministers can't answer the question of whether a woman can have a penis, it means that you're permanently in a state of cognitive dissonance, which is enough to drive anybody absolutely bonkers. Robert, thank you for your excellent call. Let's speak to another denizen of Hertfordshire. This is Andrew. Hello, Andrew.
Hello there. How are you doing? All right?
Yeah, I'm fine. You know me, my mental health is tickety-boo.
Yeah, you said something earlier, and you said it a couple of times, and it really resonated with me. You used the expression joyriding. Explain to me where's the joy in it?
Well, I suppose that people riding around at 100 miles an hour videoing themselves for TikTok are getting some sort of joy. It might be a blight and a danger to the rest of us, but they're clearly getting their kicks.
There's no joy in it, Alex. You need to stop using that. They've stolen a car, and they're driving and killing people.
No, well, look, I didn't invent that term. That isn't part of the lexicon. That's an expression that's been around for a long time. And when I say joyriding, I think people tend to know what I mean by that. I certainly am not suggesting that there's anything beautiful about it that should be condoned.
When they're driving, they're not insured. They don't have a driving licence. And not only do they kill people, they put people in wheelchairs.
I know.
So what we've got to call it out for what it is. It's theft. And these people are criminals.
I know.
Then don't use the word joy around it. There's no joy in it.
Well, look, I'm not saying there was any joy, OK? Let's not be too pedantic now. I think most of the audience understood when I said joyriding was, you know, I think I actually said it in the context of it as an oft commented on crime in the 90s, where you used to get, like, you know, the sort of burnt-out panda, which is sort of, you know, surrounded by some police cordon, or people doing, you know, donuts in the car park of Safeway. And it was one of those offences that was sort of widely spoken about back in the 90s. But I didn't invent the terminology, OK? I agree with you. There is nothing joyful about it. These people are a blight on society. They're would-be murderers and maimers. And frankly, they should be grabbed from those vehicles, made to do hard labour, breaking stones at the side of the road as a part of some sort of chain gang, as far as I'm concerned. I in no way think it's a good idea or should be promoted. And I think as well, it's about time we got real about social media companies, because it isn't just that one crime that they glorify. You get everything from trap music to buy your zombie knives to do you want some cannabis gummies to here's a little bit of porn for an 8-year-old, fancy a bit of self-harming. Why not chop off your genitals and get gender dysphoria while you're at it? There's a lot to answer for when it comes to Silicon Valley, and I hope we've actually reached now some sort of schism when it comes to their sort of unhindered march towards dystopia that they're dragging us all into. Andrew, thank you ever so much. No joy in joyriding. OK, let's take a short break now. And actually, on the matter of social media, an interesting story popped up online from X, their global affairs account, where they've spoken about the X safety team conducted an investigation into suspected Chinese inauthentic accounts involved in influence operations. 200,000 accounts making up a bot farm, where they were posting in a manner that could manipulate a legitimate debate about American AI and energy policy, including claims that data centres are driving up electricity prices and are straining the grid. I wonder why the Chinese would want us not to build data centres. I hope you're listening, Zach Polanski, because you seem to have swallowed that one hook, line and sinker, haven't you? Is that we can't have data centres, they use up too much water. No, no more than a local leisure centre, you absolute buck-toothed moronic idiot. But this has been going on for ages. I know all the leftists went to town talking about Russia's infiltration of elections. Oh, Brexit was because Russia, Trump was because Russia. No. We really do need to look at China using social media as a mass psyop, as well as other acts of grey zone warfare. In fact, we really do need to look at China for a lot of reasons. So that is what we're going to be doing just after this break.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
China. I love the way Donald Trump says that word. He's sort of like gone off the topic of China lately. He's too much into Iran, a little bit of Russia on the side, but I want him to sort of resume his battle against Beijing, because blimmin' heck, someone needs to. This country certainly isn't. We're allowing them to not only build a mega embassy over a quantum computing cable, because that's a great idea, isn't it? But now guards at China's current embassy have electroshock weapons. That's not even legal. They're apparently using them to stun protesters in London. They get away with absolute madness. Now, it turns out there's a big mega hotel in Cyprus which overlooks the RAF base in Akrotiri. Just happens to be a massive 15-acre complex with multiple stories that nowhere near the beach. No. Why would you want to go and look out at the vista of the beautiful blue Main when you can actually spy on what's taking off from an RAF base instead? I mean, come on. Have we just lost our minds when it comes to trusting them? Let's speak to Dr. John Hemmings, Director for the National Security Centre at the Henry Jackson Society. China, John, China. This government, well, I don't know. Andy Burnham doesn't seem to do much when it comes to talking about actual politics. He wants to talk about cowboy builders and ribbon cutting instead. The previous government, however, was so far up Beijing's backside, we may as well have just waved a white flag and said, please, take us over. We got to get serious about China, don't we?
Yeah. In fact, 2 days ago on Twitter, Ben Judah, who worked for, Secretary of Foreign Affairs Lamy, himself, a Labour Starmer guy, said this country lacks any deep knowledge of China. There is, within the FCDO, a very shallow understanding of China. I've been working in London about 10 years in think tanks on China. I've worked also in the US, Japan, and Australia. And it's just, we do not know what we're talking about. in this country. We need to get smarter, and we need to resource a cadre of people who understand this country, understand why hotels are built by state-run companies on the edge of an RAF field that also hosts UK spy planes and American F-35s, why this might be important, and that China's dual use of infrastructure is something that we should know it. It shouldn't be told to us by the Telegraph. The RAF should be spotting this ahead and reporting it, and it should be in parliamentary questions.
I want to talk about one of what I think is one of the most Chinese strategies when it comes to grey zone warfare. I mean, look, it's done by Iran a lot, actually, and done by Russia a lot, actually. But I feel that one thing that China is especially brilliant at is the PSYOP. There are people in America who have uncovered a load of seed companies connected to Beijing that funded things like BLM to try and disrupt society. Chinese made fentanyl flooding the streets of America, again, to try and disrupt society. Chinese bots all over the internet trying to divide politics and push certain agendas to deindustrialize us and disrupt society. They're very, let's say, psychologically manipulative. That seems to be, to me, a sort of a very Chinese way of going about conducting warfare against any state that they consider to be an enemy, which is pretty much any state that they don't own through Belt and Road initiatives.
You're absolutely right, Alex. Unbelievably, the Cold War ended. The Soviet Union fell. Russia, the People's Republic of China, did not fall. And it was very insecure after Tiananmen Square, and it has waged a massive information war campaign on the West since then. You know, if you talk about containment, you have a Cold War mentality. If you have any sort of pushback on China, you're clearly trying to contain them. There's a thing called the 50-cent gang. So if you're on Twitter or if you write on China like I do, in the comments section, there'll be people like Harry Brown, who will be an American, who will just, completely go off on you and spill out all this Chinese propaganda. It's just a regular fact of life. They are very, very busy also in this city funding think tanks and influencing universities. And so they're a part of the information space within the West as well. I think they've taken that Russian idea of like the useful idiots, those foreigners who are willing to sing their song very to heart. And are very, I think all parties have an issue with them. We all have a China problem. We need to get a bit more smarts and a bit more understanding about what they're up to.
Right. I mean, should we be talking about banning TikTok? Because for a long time, America was having that conversation, decided that it was a bit of a threat to American security. I have no doubt that that is true. When you look at certain crimes perpetrated against this country, thinking especially of things like people trafficking, TikTok is often a preferred mode of communication for these people in order to recruit their characters who they then flood our nation with. And yet, instead of actually thinking maybe we ought to have a conversation about the wild, wild west of social media, particularly TikTok, which could easily be being used nefariously, Andy Burnham's just all over it, saying, have you seen a Fredo? Which is your favourite Greg's? I mean, I just, heaven forfend, I don't think they understand. I mean, surely our intelligence agencies are briefing this government going, don't build the mega embassy. Do have a look at psychological PSYOP, mass social manipulation that could be being perpetrated by hostile states.
You'd think, right? I get extremely frustrated when things like the embassy come by. You do see very small changes in legislation, which the Henry Jackson Society has been a part of, I'm proud to say, pushing back on national security investment, where the Chinese have been trying to penetrate our digital infrastructure by buying, merging, or acquiring it. So there are now things happening. We're also pushing back on our dependence on critical minerals, but we don't really resource it. You never hear the prime minister talk about it. If you look at the United States, even though it's a bit bombastic under Trump, even Biden was saying we have to watch this, we have to figure these things out. The executive thought that China was important and was putting out things. And the UK system, it's like at the working level. Some junior minister, not even a junior minister, usually someone in the civil service who's trying to keep their pension safe, is told, go on, make China's investments safe for us so that we can take it. Find a way to say yes that also deals with national security issues, which is the wrong way to go about it in my mind.
Now, we had reports the other day about Russia using plausible deniability to commit arson attacks against perhaps weapons manufacturers that might be providing kinetic goods to Ukraine. And I said ages ago, when the wildfires started around Europe, particularly those that were alarmingly close to Bordeaux, and then we started having a pattern of them here in the United Kingdom, when actually, when it came to natural wildfires, they're some of the lowest levels on record since 2012. And I remember saying on this programme, asking someone who is an intelligence expert, saying, well, look, how likely is it that, you know, we saw the mass California wildfires, etc. How likely is it that there could be foreign operatives working on behalf of hostile states and terrorist organisations to deliberately set wildfires to cause catastrophic damage, particularly when you start seeing them very close to big conurbations? Now, it turns out that LBC has managed to infiltrate an online forum used by Islamic State supporters who have been sharing detailed instructions on starting wildfires in order to exhaust emergency services, how to do it, avoiding detection by police. I mean, it was obvious to me weeks ago that if you were a Russian foreign agent, an Iranian foreign agent, a ne'er-do-well Islamist, maybe just a mental green activist, oik, that if you wanted to go and cause a heck of a lot of problems right now when the grass is dry, you just need an oily rag and a balaclava.
All right, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I think this has got absolute possibility. If I was in government, I would absolutely have a working group on this. Yes, of course, climate change is an issue, but you're having fires the size of we've never seen before. You know, the ability to hack into a power station out in a rural area and overload it, causing it to explode, that's not science fiction. So would our enemies try to do it? It's absolutely possible. I think this is really worthy of investigation. You know, this was there was a discussion on this in the U.S. So I'm half American, often in Montana. Montana's on fire every summer, and people would say, "Well, this is because of humans." But throughout the Cold War, throughout the last 80 years, we haven't had this level of fire. So okay, you can explain it as climate change, fine. But what's the instigator? What's the fire strike coming from? And they are finding human debris like oily rags and things out there in these fires, and they are saying, either they're idiots or this is malevolence.
Well, there you go. It's always nice to be proven right, but sometimes it isn't. But I remember when I was discussing this before, and it was with the brilliant Philip Ingram, and I said, let's don our tinfoil hats, shall we? And I said to him, do you reckon hostile states, foreign operatives and terrorists might be starting these fires? And he said, well, you might have a point there. And it's good to see, actually, we now have some empirical evidence suggesting that, of course, that was going to be the case. Dr. John Hemmings, thank you ever so much, Director of the National Security Centre at the Henry Jackson Society. All right, it might not have escaped your attention that it's a bank holiday weekend coming up. I hope you have delightful plans. If you do, you might want to know what travel and transport is going to be like, because you can bet your bottom dollar the minute you're planning on going to see your relatives or attending that festival or whatever it may be, going for a weekend getaway, there's going to be train strikes and rail replacement buses and congested motorways and Lord knows what else, on top of course, cyber attacks on UK airports. There's only one man we turn to when we need to get the latest and the lowdown on traffic and travel. It is, of course, the guru, Simon Calder. He's with us after this.
I do not care about Meghan and Harry. I do not care at all. Not a gnat's backside, do I? Not at all. If they walked in this room, I'd say, get out. I don't care about Meghan and Harry. Can I put that any more emphatically? I do not care. I love Angela Levin, but I don't care about Meghan and Harry, all right? It doesn't keep me awake at night. I don't wake up in the morning going, I wonder what Megs is up to. Never, ever does it cross my mind. I don't give a hoot about Meghan and Harry.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Now, I'm sure you have wonderful bank holiday weekend plans, but are you going to be able to get to them? That is the big question, and the man to answer it is joining us right now. It is the excellent travel correspondent, Simon Calder. Simon, great to have you back. There's nobody else but you. There's no one else I'd ever ask for. If it's not Simon Calder, it's nobody. We'd rather be stuck in a traffic jam. Tell us, how bad is it going to be? Apparently 25 million motorists could be hitting the roads. Where are the pinch points going to be?
OK, well, first of all, you summed everything up so brilliantly just before the break that I thought I might as well go home, because you were basically saying don't try and go anywhere, which is roughly my message. Yes, so on the roads, it depends how the weather is going to be, because obviously if it's a complete washout, then the day trippers to the seasides may not be there. But going from what the motoring organisations are saying, it's going to be pretty full on, in particular around sort of late afternoon today, but going right through the weekend. And of course, you'll have all the homeward traffic coming in on Monday. But let me just tell you how it is looking for the absolute hot spots. Going to be the western side of the M25, mostly round from Watford down through to the M3. The RAC is saying expect to wait an hour there. Going south on the M5, heading towards lovely Somerset, Devon and Dorset from the M4 interchange all the way down to about Glastonbury. That's going to be miserable. 75 minutes, they're saying, wait there. And then everywhere else, well, it's the usual old story going along the M3 and the A303 from the London area, southeast England down to the southwest. That's going to be pretty miserable. And the M6, particularly around the turnoffs for Blackpool and the Lake District. So wherever you're going, I mean, that's just what we're predicting on, you know, if everything else is perfect. But as you know, things aren't. But as always, start your journey early in the day or wait until later if you want to, you know, tea time or so. Beyond that, things should get a lot easier.
So you might be thinking, well, that's it. I may as well set fire to my car and get the train instead. But it turns out, no, don't do that either.
Well, it all depends. Quite a lot of trains are going to be running.
Oh.
Stupendous number of people.
Oh, he's back.
Yes, I'm so sorry. Yeah, not every train is going to be running perfectly. Many of them will be, but if you want to get north-south across up and down through from the north of England, Scotland to the Midlands and southeast England, well, I probably literally start now, because over the weekend it's going to get messier and messier. The East Coast Main Line, which connects London with Yorkshire, northeast England and Scotland, that's going to be closed from Peterborough south to London on Sunday. That is going to coincide with the West Coast Main Line being blocked between Stafford and Wolverhampton, and the cross-country line from Derby down to Birmingham being closed. And at that point, lots of your lovely audience will be thinking, well, that's fine. I'll get East Midlands Railway from Sheffield, Nottingham, Derby, Leicester to London. Well, you won't on Sunday or Monday because they've got strikes. There will be a skeleton service operating, but really it's just awful. And I tell you what, that's having an impact on the on the planes and on the buses. So on Bank Holiday Monday, you're seeing British Airways, sorry, on the Sunday, the 30th, you're seeing British Airways charging up to £1,222 for a one-way flight from Edinburgh to London. Remember, it's the end. Yes, it's the end of the festival. And even if you think, OK, well, I'll get the long-distance coach, Flixbus, they are currently selling for £110 one way on the bus. So honestly, if you can travel today or you can postpone your journey until Tuesday, that's the thing to do. And we haven't even begun on the skies yet. Oh,
well, very quickly on the skies. We're running out of time. Tell us more about how terrible that's going to be.
Well, sorry to continue to be the voice of travel doom. It's going to be really, really busy coming into Stansted, Gatwick, Manchester, Bristol, busiest weekend of the year. And there are, I'm afraid, about 10,000 people stranded abroad trying to get back because of all the thunderstorms in the southeast yesterday. We had over 100 flights cancelled. Good luck, everybody.
Well, there you go. There's not a more gracious and charming man with a joyful disposition to deliver us the travel doom than the wonderful Simon Calder. I always love having you on the show. Do you know what? All I've got to deal with is the A417. That makes me get some sort of medical condition every time I try. But at least I managed to get home eventually, usually by the scenic route. OK. Hello, Mr. Bart.
Nothing works, does it? Nothing works anymore.
Well, we do.
Well, you and I do, but
Yeah.
the 417 doesn't. The train system doesn't. I mean, you know, I had to change twice to get here on the train. Nightmare.
Rail replacement bus.
I know, it's just like, oh, it's not going to where it needs to go. You need to get off here. You know.
I haven't actually. I think I did check my trains for Saturday, and it seems to be OK. But
As we know, Alex, Britain is broken.
Britain is so broken. What level of brokenness are you talking about? What
all over the
apocalyptic
place.
elements are you going to be covering on your show?
Well, that's a very good question. So I'm in for Ian Collins after 1. We're going to look at this Reform
are you? I didn't
UK
notice.
policy. No, it's a pink shirt, isn't it? And ask the question, if someone can't speak English, should they be allowed to vote? I think that's a really interesting one to